All right, what's going on? Drive time Monday afternoon. It is about 2:18. We're a little bit late today. Did some crosstalk with Zachariah today. Zachariah will be in for Sean over the next couple of weeks, so appreciate him and his work as Sean takes a little well-deserved time off. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass. I'm a Yankee fan. He's a Met fan. It might get weird today. Some news dropping yesterday on a Sunday, catching the world of Major League Baseball off guard while Juan Soto changing boroughs. He can afford to live in both. We're not going to do a ton of that today, but it is a big deal for those of you that care about baseball. But, of course, today, jam-packed with a lot of different topics to get into pertaining to the local college football scene. For me, you know what? We'll get into it, okay? We're going to do the stuff on Kyle today, Coach Witt, all of the players hitting the transfer portal. So, Porter, we're a little bit late today. I'll just say hello. How are you? How was your Monday afternoon?
It's going well. How are you, Spence?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So our first guest is going to be Bo Bush, who coached at Utah, coached at LSU, Utah State. Tom Haberstroh stops by. Josh Furlong, Jason Batacchio. So great guest to talk Utah football. But since we're a little late, let's get into it before we get to Bill today. Courtesy of our friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, it is time now on a Monday for your opening tip. So for me, it was Kyle's media availability after the loss to Brigham Young. It was what Kyle said to the media after the BYU game, and then the Monday after the BYU loss. You know, Coach Witt does his media during the college football season. During game weeks, bye weeks, they take it off. But during game weeks on Monday, Coach Witt addresses the media. And honestly, I had heard from people that certainly would know a lot better than I would that this was Kyle's last year. And that dates back to last offseason. I can't speak to it personally. I feel like I have a good relationship with Kyle, but not like a, hey, you up relationship. Like, what's your deal? You coming back type thing. So it's not like I was trying to, dig for details from Coach Witt himself. But a lot of people who I feel like would know better than I would, going all the way back to last offseason, seem to think this was it for Coach Witt. Now, we'll never fully know. Well, maybe at some point Kyle does an entire, truthful sit down. I'd love to interview him and ask him the questions about when he decided that he wasn't going out like this season. I don't know when, and I honestly don't know whether or not this season had any bearing on Coach Witt's future plans. No clue. But after the loss to BYU, which at the time was the team's fifth straight loss, they ended up losing 7 straight. Kyle spoke in a way that just made me feel like he was speaking very pragmatically. He was speaking very matter-of-factly. He was talking about the work. He was already kind of looking ahead to the offseason, quite frankly. He probably saw the tea leaves because I'm sure that coaching staff up there saw just how fractured this team was far before we did, and we certainly saw it on the field. I mean, that's not a healthy locker room if you're going to lose 7 straight. I can't speak to the rumors that are flying about some of the stuff that may or may not have happened this year, but we get the short statement from Coach Witt that he certainly is coming back to coach Utah football coming up next year. So we're going to get to all the other – we've got a couple of very empty segments where we'll just kind of continue these conversations. We have a lot of really good guests that we'll get to with all this stuff. We're going to talk about the mass exodus to the transfer portal, namely with all 3 quarterbacks, and why the Isaac Wilson transfer, I think, stings a little differently than Brandon or Sam, with all due respect. There is some news about Cam, but there's not an official announcement. The current expectation is Cam will not come back for 2025. I don't think he's going to. I don't know. This gentleman from CBS Sports who reported it, at this point, he could be another one of these goobs that are guessing for engagement as far as I don't know who he is, but that announcement has got a lot of traction. My whole thing with the Cam stuff, as I've said before, it does feel like one of those marriages that is fine and has been good for a while, but it's probably best to hug each other and say, hey, take care and go your separate ways. So I still believe that's what's going to happen, but nothing official. But, the Isaac stuff hurts because, and Jake Murphy, who's been on the show before, Dale's son, who played college football at the University of Utah, had a couple of tweets about this over the weekend. And he took some flack, he took some heat, but I actually think he's correct because typically, historically speaking, Utah football does not sign quarterbacks out of high school with a pedigree that Isaac has. Now, they have before, but that's more the exception, not the rule. And there's an excellent chance that Isaac ends up somewhere where he'll be able to sit behind a good quarterback for a year or two and then take that job and kill it and maybe end up playing pro football. Like, that could happen. And I think the expectation is it would happen here after Isaac sat behind Cameron for a year and then, maybe take over next year. Who knows? We'll never know, as Isaac Wilson has hit the transfer portal. But with the Coach Witt stuff, I have found the reaction very interesting. The reaction of the community here that care about Utah football, the reaction of people who cover the team, and the reaction, quite frankly, of people who are firmly entrenched as very important figures, not just for the athletic department, but for the school. And so I was talking to, during Crosstalk, I was talking to Zachariah about this. And, I got to be a little careful here, but I did spend some time with a very powerful donor and very powerful figure that the University of Utah as a whole and the athletic department too rely a lot upon. And I'll just leave it there. I'll tell you this: we don't share the same first name, so not that guy. So you can rest assured it wasn't him. But we started talking about Kyle, started talking about Coach Witt, and he was diplomatic. He didn't really lean one way or the other, but did allude to the fact that there are several people that are very important members of this community that do a lot financially and economically for the institution and the athletic department that do feel a little bit like it might be time to make the transition from Kyle to Morgan. Now, for me, from my space, I'm not going to sit here on a Monday afternoon after the announcement came down that Coach Witt is coming back and crack a mic and do the thing where it's like the game has passed Kyle by. Like, that's the dumbest thing anybody could say, and that's not the way I feel. But there is a different tone and tenor to this that has kind of caught me off guard as far as the reaction that I've heard from not just this person who I sat with last week, but also people that love Utah football and season ticket holders, donors, boosters, and such. And quite frankly, the lifeblood of the program, because that's what it is now. You guys know the deal. If you're a season ticket holder, they're asking you to really invest financially in the program in a way that they've never asked you to before. And it's because out of necessity, every college football coach, when he has an opportunity to take a microphone, what does he do? He talks about NIL. He talks about the necessity of making sure financially they're in a place to not just keep up with the Joneses today, but as I always talk about, and I'll continue to always talk about, when the next inevitable and hopefully final landscape shift in college football occurs, you want to be in every way possible the best possible candidate for whoever those power brokers are to make sure you're sitting at that lunch table. Because I can tell you, if you're not, life will change from that day forever. If the number's 40, which I've heard a lot of people talk about, a lot of college football writers write about, you've got to be one of the 40 programs in the country that is in this elite group of college football turned now basically into pro football. And if you are in that group, it changes the history of your program forever for better. But if you're not, you run the risk of being irrelevant. So there really does have to be kind of a 30,000-foot macro view right now as opposed to reacting what's in a vacuum. And if you're Mark Harlan, if you're Taylor Randall, what do you do here if there is a situation in play where some of the most powerful people that you rely upon to write you checks every year aren't necessarily thrilled with where you're at? And I don't know in totality what that looks and sounds like on a Monday after Coach Witt has decided to come back. And again, I want to be clear about my personal opinion. This is the best coach we've ever had here. And in my opinion, he has earned the right to let us know when he's done. That's the way I feel. Now, will I feel that way if they're 2-7 and lose 5 straight to start the year? I don't know. I so badly, I so badly do not want to have that conversation about Kyle. I never want to have that conversation about Kyle. I can remember as Jerry Sloan entered the end of his tenure, and obviously he wasn't going to win on the level he was with John and Carl, but when results started to get a little loose and relationships started to get a little frayed, I remember thinking, like, I so badly do not want Jerry to go out like this. And Jerry, just so, in perfect Jerry Sloan fashion, just decided when he was done. And ultimately, as a result of a frayed relationship with a little bit of a prima donna, he was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. But my sincere hope for Kyle is he can go out the way he's earned to go out, and that is at the end of a great season where they're competing for a conference championship. There's a lot of talent in the program. The finances of the athletic department are in great shape, so he leaves Morgan with a job that is a little bit not self-sustainable. That's never going to be the deal here. But he leaves Morgan with a train that's on track, not one that just lost 7 straight games and was supposed to be the favorite to win the Big 12 championship and had a mass exodus of talent leave the portal, right? So my sincere hope for Kyle is that's what we're talking about, maybe at the end of next year or the year after that, but we know for now he'll be back on the sidelines for the Utes next year. All right, Bill Bush knows Kyle really well. We'll bring him in coming up next. Then it's Tom Haberstroh, Josh Furlong, Jason Batacchio on a Monday Drive. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. I don't know if you were spying on me over the weekend, but I've just decided that part of living in Utah for me is 1 or 2 sinus infections a year. So on my back all weekend, Friday doing the show, it looked like Gotham outside. Went downtown to get some dinner. If you look at some of the pictures, the air was just like basically at your feet.
Yeah.
Should not have gone outside. There's a documentary on Hulu right now called The Dark Side of the 90s. And as a child of the 90s, and it just goes into all of music is one of them. So, I know that we're about to be joined by somebody with the last name of Bush, and that was the deal. But they were talking about that song, that band, the documentary I watched over the weekend.
Wow.
Were you spying on me?
I wasn't,
Okay.
but
All right.
this was the song, of course, was the pick when you bring up Bush. So maybe there's some serendipity there, but no, the reasoning behind it was our next guest, who quite fond of Coach Bush.
And it is a great day to have him on. Bill Bush, longtime college football coach, national champ, and now he slums it with those of us in the media on a Monday. Bill, how are you, sir?
Doing great. The word serendipity, that's a big word. I'm glad you guys are expanding my vocabulary all the time. I like being on with you guys.
Well, it is serendipitous to have you today, if I could use it in that connotation, because, of course, a guy that you know really well announced via a very quick Michael Jordan-type press release that he is back. So, Coach Witt, back for year 21 on the sidelines for the Utes, Bill. You know him well. You work with him. What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is that I've been well noted on the media, social media that I've been on, and on the radio show that I'm on, that I have said this over and over again, that I think he's the best coach in college football. And I say that just because of what he's gotten done with resources, which are good. But I said, are they the same as a Texas A&M in some places? Probably not. And what he's gotten done and what he has transformed that team, from the Mountain West into the Pac-12 and getting, a couple-time champion and all the things that he's done is just incredible. And a steady hand during this time of craziness in this profession is really important, even though they have a great plan for when Coach Scally takes over. But right now, just having a veteran in charge, I think, means the world to a program, because it's crazy time out there.
So I'm asking this strictly out of curiosity, Bill, because I honestly don't know. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on whether or not the disappointing nature of the season had any impact on whether or not Kyle came back for one more. And I could really see it going both ways, because I was told last offseason by people that I just characterize as in the know in a way that I'm not with him, really felt like this was it for him. Wanted to get the opportunity to make the expanded 12-team CFP, had the roster he wanted, favored to win the Big 12. And then when things went south, I just had to wondered aloud on the show whether or not a guy like that did not want to go out like that. What are your thoughts?
First of all, hypothesis, I think, is a great one by you to think that way. That's brilliant. I would say this: I talk to Coach Witt quite often. I'm going to see him tonight, actually, and I talk to him all the time. The one thing I can be very secure with is that I never asked him. I never once said, are you back because of this or what's going on? I didn't say that, but I would have to think that there has to be some part of him that, because of the way that the season played out, because I believe if they were in the 12-team playoff right now and how everything's ended on that note, that probably was maybe more of a time to step away. But when I say that, I can say it with 100% accuracy that I never asked him, nor do I have the factual information, but I know someone that is that competitive and that good of a coach that it is hard to leave when things didn't go as well as you'd hoped.
And you know what else, Bill? I could also see him be like, I like doing this, and I get paid a lot of money, so I'm coming back no matter what. I mean, I always go back to the Greg Popovich, and my listeners are probably tired of this, but I can remember when Tim Duncan was in the November, December of his career, Greg Popovich said on multiple occasions, when he's done, I'm done. Then Duncan retired and pops on like a 5-year extension that summer, shows up to camp, and everyone's like, dude, what gives? And he was very honest. He said, look, I like doing this, and they pay me a lot of money to do this. I simply wanted to come back and keep doing it. And by the way, he's still doing it. So I wonder if you think there's anything there with Kyle where maybe people like us, talking heads, overthink it, and the guy just likes doing what he does. He's great at it and just wants to keep doing it.
He definitely likes doing what he does. And it's just so everyone knows this game, Coach Whittingham's in the 1 percentile that gets a chance to control it when he gets to end when he wants it to end. The rest, assistant coaches, most of the time, the music just stops and there's not enough chairs. And a lot of times, even as head coaches, you'll see across the country, all of a sudden, it's like, you know what? It is time for us to do something different. And so he's in a unique situation because of what he's done throughout his entire career. But with that, like I said, being said, it's really hard to not do this anymore. It's really hard. So I'm sure that's part of it too. Is like, man, this is something I've done my entire life. I enjoy being around a team. That's what he'll probably talk about. I know I always have that. The thing you miss the most is the team. It's not calling a certain call on third down, but just being part of making young men better is something he's brilliant at. And so it's really hard to walk away from it. So I think that is a highly chance that's accurate. That I like doing this. And as you know, Kyle, he's in extremely good shape, takes great care of himself. And so he's not fading whatsoever with, you know what, I think the game's kind of just passing me by and it's a lot for me. Not the case at all with him.
I was doing some reading over the weekend because, as I referenced, I had this wicked sinus infection that kept me on my back.
Too. I'm with you.
Oh,
I've
man.
had the same thing going.
Yeah.
It's torture.
Yeah.
But the worst part is you can get through it. So I think that's why it lingers on for months at a time, because you just kind of keep pushing on. And so I feel your pain.
Yeah, it was one of those where I woke up. I'm like, wait, am I sick, or am I just living in Salt Lake air quality in the winter sick? And luckily it was just a sinus thing, and it's still lingering, but I'm all right here at work because I love doing the show. But doing some reading over the weekend, and I was just reading this quote book because I always kind of love to get into some of this stuff. And there was just this quote about what makes people happy, and one of the pieces of day-to-day happiness is having something meaningful to do for a job or for an activity. There's some people that get into philanthropic work. They like to do charitable efforts with their endeavors, and it really doesn't matter how much money you have. It really doesn't matter how financially secure that you are. If you don't have something meaningful to wake up and do day to day, your happiness tends to be fleeting. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but you're a guy that was in the coaching world for a long time, and then you were out of it for a while as well. Do you think it's also maybe just something that you can only play so much golf, you can only ski so much, you can only spend so much time at home? Do you think it's probably something Kyle just feels like it's meaningful for him to just do day to day? It's kind of part of who he is.
Absolutely. And what you read is accurate. And if not, you'll find, like I said, coaches that do different things. It's like, why does Urban Meyer do the on Fox Sports? Why does he do that? Well, he's involved with things. He has a reason to get up early and prepare. I don't think probably anybody has a lot more money in coaching than Coach Saban does. And yet he prepares, so he found a different avenue to do that. Just like you said, a reason to get up, a reason to get out of bed. Because after a while, just fine dining and like you said, golf and ski, whatever different things you can do to get away and enjoy, it's hard because you just lose the interactions when you're so used to it. So someone like Coach Witt, for an assistant coach, I used to bring up myself as an assistant. I would talk to roughly 120 people a day at work, between support staff, between the different people that work there, players on both sides. I was a defensive coordinator, I was a special teams coordinator, and then just family. By the time the day was over, I usually interact with probably over 100 people. When you go from interacting with 100 people a day to two, that's a very unique situation, and it can really kind of suck the energy out of you.
All right, so away from the Kyle dynamic, but continuing with some Utah football storylines, Bill, because when you were good enough to come in studio, it was early on in the year where we all thought it was going to be a really fun, successful season for Utah football. And the hard thing, as I've talked about so many different times, it's not completely unfair just to say they lost their quarterback and everything changed. Like, you can say that and you wouldn't be wrong, right? But 7 straight L's, and the favorite in the Big 12 ends up fourth to last. You know, I continue to chuckle that the most popular preseason Big 12 title game pick in Vegas was Oklahoma State and Utah, and they combined to go 2-16 in conference. It's just such a wild, crazy season. But from your eye, from your vantage point, how did this season get away from Utah so quickly?
It did. It took a turn when the quarterback was lost. Obviously, I watched every single game of Utah, and then they went on the road, and had that really big win. Was it Oklahoma State? Was that right after that? Am I correct? That was the next game, I believe, or was it 2 games after?
They went Utah State and then Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Then Oklahoma State. And so when they got through that, I felt they had kind of righted the ship a little bit. If you just look at it from a layman's term, I thought you would say probably were not able to run the ball as well as they would like to have to be able to do that. The one thing I've been part of, like I said, so many incredible times. I've been part of sometimes when it's just sometimes the things didn't mesh and it didn't show up on the field. The thing that stood out to me was that there was no quit in the team. I thought they played really good. They played really good defense until it got maybe wore down a little bit towards the end, and then came back in the last game that you wouldn't say that at all with how they played, but it may be a little bit of being wore down with it. But they held the team together, and that's what you look at the most when you're evaluating someone during a tough time is did they lose the team? And when you lose the team, is some of the things you saw, like at the end, if you looked at Oklahoma State, Colorado, I think 52-0. That would look at it and say that they lost the team at that place at that time. And Utah never lost a team. Coach Whittingham never lost the team. Morgan Scalley never lost the defense. Did a great job with it. And I said this numerous times before. I've worked at all levels, at the highest level of different places, and been at Ohio State, been at LSU, these places. The best offensive coordinator I've ever seen was Andy Ludwig. So when things weren't going well, I know what his preparation is like and what his work ethic is like. And there was probably just things that it was kind of an insurmountable type of thing when things turned. And just, luckily Kyle's back in charge again for another year. And I think things will go great.
So I don't know if you know Jason Beck. I know coaches seem to know each other all over the place. You guys just seem to know every single other coach in all of college football. And you referenced Coach Ludd, and I felt bad for him. It does seem like oftentimes the offensive coordinator is the one that falls on the sword in football.
Correct.
All due respect to Coach Bajakian, but when he did his first media availability, he said, well, it's Andy's system, and we're going to keep running the system. And I'm like, well, what is Mike going to do with Andy's system that Andy couldn't do? It just like I never felt like that was really the course of action. But nonetheless, that's how it went down, and Andy will always be remembered for one of the greats here for what he did when he actually had a healthy quarterback. But they land on Jason Beck, who had a really good year last year at New Mexico. It's another one of those BYU guys up here. They got Utah guys down there. I don't know if you know him, Bill, but my guess is you're familiar with his pedigree. What do you make of the new OC up on the Hill?
To say I talked to him and know him personally, I don't. To say I followed his work, I followed the heck out of it. It's a couple things. One, I'm really good friends with Bronco Mendenhall. And we talk all the time. We text and talk. We were on the phone, right before they took off for his trip to Hawaii. And I also watched, I believe, every single game of New Mexico. And from the first game that they lost against Montana State through the success they had, and one of the better coaching jobs in the country this year, getting that team to 5-7 and being just a touchdown away from going to a bowl game. So when I watched them, I was amazed at what they got done offensively, and their quarterback played very, very well for them. But what they got done offensively, because defensively they really struggled at New Mexico, so they weren't getting off the field, and they weren't getting a lot of short fields. And so he was working a lot of I wouldn't say the word miracles, but some incredible coaching. But I was blown away by how well they did. And matter of fact, one of the first text messages I sent, whatever it was, 3 or 4 days ago, was to Coach Whittingham and just said, it just appears to me you've made an incredible hire. And so very excited about the plan they have there. Someone that's going to understand the state of Utah and understand everything about what goes on in rivalry games between BYU and Utah and what it takes to do what it takes to get things done in this state. So I think it's a brilliant hire. and not a random one. It was well researched, obviously, but for what New Mexico did offensively this year was fantastic.
So I will kick the tires with you on a bevy of New Mexico players who are in the transfer portal right now. And Bill, as you may have heard, Utah needs a quarterback. They might need two. They might need three.
Right.
So Devin Dampier was Jason's quarterback in New Mexico. Decent with his arm, dynamic on the ground, and he's out there as a possibility. They're starting running back Eli Sanders, who had a good year, and then their leading receiver, Luke Weissong, also in the portal. What do you think of the potential possibility of one or all three of them ending up in Salt Lake City?
Sure. Well, one thing, again, I will make sure that I'm very clear on this, that I've had zero discussions with Coach Whittingham as much as we talk about that. But I would say this, they would all be brilliant. And if you look back, that has been one of the biggest positives in coordinator change or head coaching change. The reason Indiana is Indiana this year is because they have a tremendous head coach, but he also brought, kind of the traveling all-stars with him, I think 12. And I believe 9 to 10 of them are starting at Indiana right now from JMU. And so to have players that know the system, those, and also very successful players, I think would be great. I would never get involved with hey, you guys, Utah needs to take those guys. Let me tell you this, because they'll do their research and they'll know what's right for Utah. But I love all those players. And like I said, in a bizarre way, I might be the only person that maybe watched every single game of New Mexico this year, except for I couldn't get Hawaii. And that late night game, I couldn't get that one anywhere on TV. But those guys are dynamic players. And so if they come to Utah, I would be very excited about it.
Let me follow up about the quarterback. What stands out most to you about Devin Dampier, who has a number of years left to play? I mean, it wouldn't be a one-year rental. He could come here, he could grow. He was the only player in the country to throw for at least 2,500 yards and run for at least 1,000. He threw picks, but quarterbacks throw picks. And it, from what I'm reading, there are people hot on his heels, including the Utes. What sort of player is he? Should Ute fans be watching him next year?
What I always talk about in coaching, I've been lucky to be around, a bunch. Like I said, I had that opportunity, to be around Alex Smith, and was able to be the guy who recruited him. And then same thing with Joe Burrow at LSU. And I was able to be in part of the recruiting process, recruiting him to LSU. Is that the thing that stood out the most about him, besides their toughness and talent and every throw, was the ability to process. And that's the one thing that doesn't matter what you talk about. You do not have the ability to change someone on their ability to process. They just have a skill set that they have, and their ability to process, and that's what he does so well. He can process, which means when the coaching's over, the ball has been snapped, everything may have just changed from the picture you just thought was going to happen, and now it changed in coverage, it changed into a pressure, and he can make adjustments on the run. So I would liken him to a very gifted point guard on a basketball team, and how well they can process on the run on what just happened around him. And he has a special feel on the field on when to escape, when to throw, when it's time. And those guys drive you crazy as a defensive coordinator. So that's that stands out the most, is his ability to process. Yes, he can. I've seen guys that he can run. Can he process? He can pass. Can he process? And so he has the ability to process very fast.
All right, Bill, before I set you loose, and I do want you to tell our listeners where you're at, because it's a pretty cool event that you'll be at tonight, but you referenced Bronco as one of your buddies, and this one completely caught me off guard. I've heard the rumor. I'm like, would he really go to Utah State? All due respect, we had their athletic director on the program on Friday, and Diana was great. But you know him well. He lands at Utah State. It's a 6-year deal to take over up in Logan. And it's interesting, Bill, because as you know, in a way, it's not a perfect parallel, but in a way, it's a little bit like the task he inherited at Brigham Young after Gary Croton was relieved of his duties. The powers that be down there said, we need to restore this back to what we're used to it being, and Bronco did that. Then he goes to Virginia, and he made some good money there, did a good job there, took some time off, I think, to fish up in Montana, lands at New Mexico, and now for the next 6 years, at least that's what the contract says, he's at Utah State, where he is going to be asked to kind of clean up a program that had a mass exodus with the coaching staff last offseason. Unpack your thoughts on Bronco Mendenhall to Utah State, Bill.
Home run hire, just because, again, I believe there's certain jobs you go to that you need to have somebody that really has knowledge of the state, and that's what Bronco has. And I think if you have That's why I believe the hire of Morgan Scally as the coach in waiting is also brilliant, because you need somebody that has that knowledge in that state. When Urban came in, he had Kyle there to really work him through how everything works and how the program is run. So Bronco's a home run hire because his work ethic is the same as it was from I've known him for 30 years. When he left Northern Arizona, I took his job at Northern Arizona with myself and Gary Anderson, and I slept in his apartment as he moved on to Oregon State. So I've known him that long. He works today as hard as he did then, and he understands how to build this. What he did in New Mexico probably was his best coaching job ever. It really was. What he did at New Mexico to get them within a touchdown of a bowl game was the most incredible coaching job he's probably done, even at BYU, even at Virginia. And so to have someone with that knowledge be able to build it, and he'll be able to do a great job at Utah State, and it'll be fairly quick. But he'll do a tremendous job. So home run hire, great job by the athletic director and by everyone there in the administration to see how important it was to get him. And then obviously, and he fits so well in all aspects. So fired up to watch. Obviously, I'm a big Aggie fan from coaching there, obviously. So a big fan of that.
Let's hear about the event that you're in Vegas for tonight.
Yeah, it's been great. Like I said, Alex, I'm out here with myself and my wife and myself, and we have a big function tonight with him, a big dinner and evening, which is going to be a lot of fun. Then tomorrow will be at his induction tomorrow night into the College Football Hall of Fame. And so just have always stayed very close with him through the recruiting process. His mom, Pam, brought it up last night when we were talking. She said, Bill, you had to recruit him twice, which we did. We recruited him the first time with Coach Mack, and then there was a coaching change. And then the first trip that myself and Urban Meyer made was back to San Diego to re-recruit Alex to come back after his freshman year. And so we got through it twice. And, obviously first pick in the draft, Heisman Trophy finalist, and 16 years in the NFL. And now the College Football Hall of Fame. That's pretty incredible company for someone. And man, this Alex Smith and his family love the Utes. And I was lucky enough to be out there when his name went up in the Ring of Honor, and I was able to be on the field with Alex, with his family when they got given that ring, got inducted into the Ring of Honor, and that was a great pleasure for me. And now myself and my wife are out here with him to celebrate tonight and tomorrow night for this great event.
We'll enjoy that, Bill. I appreciate your time, sir. Have a great week. Would love to have you on soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Go Utes.
All right. Bill Bush, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go before we catch a break. Angela Peterson, Lifestyle Men's Health on a Monday afternoon. Angela, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So guess what I did this morning? Just woke up and went and lifted weights. It's not a big deal. Now, ultimately, you've been able to help me over the past year with testosterone replacement therapy. Now, the reason I bring it up is it's like you wake up at 7 in Salt Lake in the winter. It's 22 degrees. And you have to summon everything that you have inside of you to actually go work out. But since I started with testosterone replacement therapy, I'm not going to say it's easy, but you're just so much more motivated because your energy level is high. And that's one benefit of many. Tell our listeners about how you can help them with testosterone replacement therapy.
That's so true, Spence. Testosterone replacement therapy changes so many things in a guy's life. So if you're feeling like you don't have the right energy, if you're feeling like you have a low libido, if you're cranky, if you're irritated, and if you just don't feel like you can put one foot in front of the other anymore, come see me, get your testosterone evaluated, and I can get you on the road to feeling better, having more energy, having more vitality really, really quickly.
All right. Unfortunately, we had a group of folk that ran through town and said they had a solution for erectile dysfunction. They didn't, and they're not in business anymore, which is very sad. You have a different treatment for ED that actually works. Why is your treatment different, and what results are you seeing?
Well, our treatment is totally different, and I do feel bad for a lot of your listeners that did get swindled by ineffective treatments. But I can tell you we are seeing incredible success with our regenerative erectile dysfunction treatment. We use live stem cells, and we also do other things such as testosterone and peptides to augment that treatment. But we're seeing great results. And if you value yourself and your relationship, now is the time to do something about it because we can make things better.
All right, Angela, what's the special offer this holiday season you have for our listeners who give you a call today?
We're still offering our signature erectile dysfunction treatment at 50% off, and then we're also offering 6 months of free testosterone replacement therapy if you proceed with the ED treatment.
That is an excellent holiday offer. If you've been waiting to call, good for you, because now you're going to save a grip of money. But pick up the phone and call Lifestyle Men's Health today at 385-458-9203. That's 385-458-9203, 385-458-9203, or online at lifestylemensclinic.com. Angela, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
A little bit of a break from the football chatter to do a little pro basketball coming up with Tom Haberstroh. Then the rest of the show essentially is either college or pro football with Josh Furlong. Jason Batacchio will join us as well. RSL made a signing. I know you guys are excited about that. We'll get to that later. It's a Drive on a Monday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. We going to roll with it today? We're just going to continue to roll with it based off of this Dark Side of the 90s documentary feature on Hulu I watched over the weekend. We're just going to roll with 90s rock?
I think so.
That's fine. That's fine. Our next guest is also a child of the 90s. I'm older than he is. Tom, have you seen Tom Haberstroh? We're going to do little hoops here. Have you seen the Dark Side of the 90s documentary? It's like 2 seasons. It's all about the 90s. Have you checked that out?
No. I'm a big fan of 60 songs that explain the 90s, but I haven't checked that.
It's an Vice did it, and they typically do a pretty good job. It's on Hulu, and part of living in Utah, just so you know, in the winter, sinus infections, that's just the deal. Our air quality in the winter is horrible. So on my back all weekend, of course, a lot of football, basketball, but as a fellow child of the 90s, I think you'd find this Dark Side of the 90s documentary on Hulu somewhat interesting.
Oh, I'm already got it queued up. I can't wait.
All right, that a guy. All right, so Tom Haberstroh on a Monday afternoon, little NBA Daily Assist style. The Jazz are kind of in a little bit of a dark spot here. We have the NBA Cup break, so they're going to have a game on Friday. It's actually a home game. They only have 2 games over the next 10 or 11 days or so. Do you like the NBA Cup as far as what it means for teams that aren't in the action, a little bit of time off for teams this time of year?
Yeah, it kind of snuck up on us, didn't it? I mean, the idea a few years ago was to do an extended all-star break from a weekend to a whole week off. And we kind of have this like soft week off for, 90% of the NBA teams, and it's very interesting. I cover the Blazers on their broadcast, and, we were discussing, the upcoming schedule, and it hit us that like we have 1 game in 8 days. And it's wild to think that if you don't make the NBA Cup, you essentially got a baked-in vacation, and it's I think for a lot of teams, 25 games into the season is 25 games into the season. I mean, football teams don't play more than 17 games in a year, and we know that season is crazy exhausting. The NBA season has like if you're good, you have 4 times 25 games. You have 100 games to go, and so it's. If we think of it as, hey, every 25 games you're going to have a little bit of a break, this makes more sense. And I think what it's building towards, Spence, is I think in the next 5 years, the NBA will have like an international cup that, you got the Emirates sponsor that's doing these games, that's sponsoring the NBA in-season cup. And I think once the NBA expands to 2 additional markets, Seattle and Vegas seems to be the leaders in the clubhouse, I think they're trying to create basically like a Christmas break here, is that there's going to be an in-season tournament that they're going to basically stop regular season games and have this Euro Cup style in-season tournament. So they kind of soft launched it, this idea that they're having this break for most of the league so that, these 8 teams can go play in it. I think it's going to be like a hard stop in the regular season schedule, and then they're going to do the in-season tournament. So I think like teams like the Jazz and the Blazers that I cover, and, the Boston Celtics didn't make it either. Interestingly enough, like they're going to have a lot of time off, and you're seeing guys like LeBron James take Sunday's game off, James Harden taking Sunday's game off. These guys were playing all 82 games, basically. They hadn't missed a game all year, and then suddenly – right before this big layoff, they decided to take off their first game, so they get an extended vacation essentially. And so I think it's good. The in-season tournament is good. I'm going to be the jury is still out whether this week off of basketball will be good for these teams or if they're going to come back rusty as all heck.
All right, as you referenced, and for our listeners' context, Tommy does some work for the Blazers on their broadcast team. And, Tom, I got to say, so the Jazz have won 5 games all year. I don't think they're going to win many games the rest of the way, but the history books will tell you on Friday night, the Jazz have the 8th largest winning margin in team history, and for the first time in Jazz history, they had 9 players scoring double figures. It made no sense at all. Is that just like at some point – a pro basketball player is going to make a bevy of shots? What did you see as the Jazz smoked the Blazers by 42?
With no Laurie.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
Like Markkanen didn't play,
Right.
and it was, I was going into the game being like, "Ooh, this is going to be interesting because Markkanen's not playing. They've got Svi playing there and starting in front of him, and what I didn't realize is that Johnny Juzang is going to be an MVP. And that guy didn't miss a shot in that game. It was wild to see. They've shot 50, 40, 90. Basically, Larry Bird-esque shooting percentages. As a team, they have 55% from the floor, 44% from three, and 91% from the free throw line on 23 attempts. And I hadn't seen anything like that all year. Like, this was a clinic that they put on to the Blazers. And I think it just goes to show you that, like, man, these guys are so good at basketball. They always say that, like, the worst player in the NBA is by far the best player you've ever seen. You'd get smoked in one-on-one. Even you, Spence, FCAC extraordinaire, would get smoked by the 450th best player in the NBA in your prime. And I think this is kind of one of those games that you're like, they're NBA players for a reason. John Collins looked great. Walker Kessler was blocking shots left and right, a plus 35 in that game. They could do no wrong. And it just goes to show that the NBA, you never know what's going to happen because, look, over the weekend we saw Jokic lose to the Wizards. And then they go 2 days later and they beat the Atlanta Hawks by 30. So this weekend was wild. And the Sacramento Kings just put a hurt on the Utah Jazz just a couple nights later. And it's like, man, the NBA is so unpredictable. I did not see that beatdown, especially with Larry Markkanen out on a Friday night. I just didn't see it. But Shaedon Sharpe, I guess. I mean, we talked about it for basically the entire second half. That Shaedon Sharpe dunk was awesome in that game. But everything else from the Blazers' perspective was something to forget about.
Just one follow-up on the Blazers here. What really, in your estimation, happened with DeAndre Ayton, who at one point I think was thought to be certainly one of the solutions in Phoenix and a rising young big. And they've got Donovan Clingan on the roster now, who has been struggling a little bit with a knee sprain from what I'm seeing. But what in your estimation, from your vantage point, what has happened to the potential that we all saw in DeAndre Ayton?
Well, I don't think it was just starting in Portland. I think you heard in Phoenix, that they needed more consistency from him effort-wise. And I think that really is what it takes to be an all-NBA center, all-star center, is to bring it every single night because you're going against dudes like Jokic, you're going against Anthony Davis, and I think it's just an energy effort thing. The other night, Chauncey Billups said he didn't like the spirit of DeAndre Ayton, and that's why he didn't play in the second half against Utah. And, that's about as strong as you'll hear Chauncey Billups in a post-game press conference. The Blazers lost by 40 plus to the Memphis Grizzlies earlier in the year and said, you're a loser if you go to sleep tonight. Don't let this win just don't let this loss wash over you. I want it to keep you up all night. And losers will sleep at night after getting blown out like that, embarrassed like that. And I think that's what Chauncey Billups wants from this team, is just to have effort like that every single night. And, of course, 2 nights later, Sunday night against Anthony Davis, DeAndre Ayton has a much better outing, 14 points, 19 rebounds against Anthony Davis. So that's the sort of effort that I think Chauncey wants to see out of DA. And, I actually think when you look at it, Luka should have gone number 1 in that draft. Easily should have gone number 1 in that draft. He didn't go number 1, and DeAndre Ayton did. He went to University of Arizona, which at the time, the owner of the Phoenix Suns was a big donor to the University of Arizona, a big fan of University of Arizona, went to University of Arizona. And so he selected, of course, DeAndre Ayton number 1. And so sometimes you're unfairly number 1 overall pick. And if he's the number 4 pick, I don't think we're putting him as high of a standard. But I know what you're talking about. It's, I think, dating back to his Phoenix Suns days, I think it really is just a consistency night to night. And against the NBA's best, you have to bring it every single night, or else, you're going to have duds like he did against Utah.
So now that you've seen it up close, one of the very few bright spots and what I consider to be just an A-plus start to the season has been Walker Kessler, who is in year 3 under Will Hardy. He's the only player on the roster who will have had 3 full years with Will. And so if they're going to develop, I'm going to watch Walker because 3 years under the coach and you're the only one would indicate whether or not the coach can develop. And he was really good against Portland. He had 13 points, 17 boards. He had 5 blocks. And really, he's been mostly that all year long, with, of course, the exception here or there. Now that you've seen it up close, great rookie year, and then sophomore slump, has been, in my opinion, one of the better players on the team all year long. He's missed a little bit of time, but what did you see from Walker Kessler on Friday? What do you make of who he could potentially become?
Well, I saw it after his rookie season. I thought it was perfect that he was playing in Utah because Rudy Gobert seemed like a good proxy for his career, someone to chase. The idea that you're not going to be a 20-point scorer, but you're still going to be an all-star player because you're just defending the paint with reckless abandon. That guys just cannot get into the paint with you roaming around there. And I think Kessler, for me, it was about his toughness and his physicality that you want to see him develop more. When you look at his body, it doesn't look like he's nearly in the same realm in terms of his fitness and his strength as Rudy Gobert. Like, you put those two guys next to each other and you can tell that Rudy is very meticulous and cares a lot about his strength and being in shape and running the floor and all of that. And I think Walker Kessler, I want to see that from him, is just be a little bit more serious about his strength and physicality because, if he wants to take that next step, I think offensively he can do more than what he's doing, and he just doesn't get to the free throw line because he doesn't play physical. And in some ways it's similar to DeAndre Ayton where, it's almost like he wants to stay on the floor because, they depend on him to be the center for, 40 minutes a night. They want him out there for a lot of minutes. So maybe he's not trying to be physical and stay out of foul trouble. But for me, Walker Kessler should be getting to the free throw line more, should be trying to go through guys rather than around guys. And I just don't know if his strength is there yet. And when you look at guys like Anthony Davis, Jokic is like one of the strongest bulls in the league. He's so big, so strong, and he runs the floor with impunity. This guy goes up and down every time. I was talking to some coach who said he's the best conditioned guy in the NBA. Jokic, he looks like that, but he always has this high motor where he's constantly running the floor. And so I think that's what it's going to take for guys like Walker Kessler and DeAndre Ayton to take that next step, is to have that high motor, run really hard down the floor like Rudy Gobert does every time he sets a screen. It's a hard screen. He holds it, and then he rotates and goes straight at the rim and calls for the ball. And that sort of, intensity and physicality, it doesn't happen for everybody. But if you're willing to be physical and willing to put your body on the line, you can be even more than just a shot blocker who rotates well and is able to do a lot of weak side help. You can be a real presence, a strong presence, a foundational defensive guy rather than just a shot blocker. And I think Walker Kessler, if he wants to take that leap, like so many NBA players, it's all about being serious about your body and being serious about physicality. And you do those two things, and he's going to have a really bright future.
Okay, Mr. Statistician Face Man, are you ready?
I do.
Are you ready? No, I'm just going to say this into this microphone. I know you probably already know that, but I did not have this on the bingo card. Through the first portion of the season, John Collins is legitimately 50, 40, 90. He's 54 from the field, 44 from three, 92 from the free throw line. It's interesting because I've never been big on him. Like, I was a little bit stunned that the Hawks paid him the way that they paid him. And then you see stretches where you're like, wait, am I wrong about him? He's 27. It's not like he's 38. I don't think he fits the timeline. I don't know if this is like play him to potentially entice other teams to make a play. And if I'm a GM, I'm not paying him $26 million, but should I eat a little crow? Well, I mean, how impressed are you as far as what John Collins has done to start the year?
You forgot. You said, Mr. Statistician Face Man, I'm going to do you one up more. Wake Forest graduate.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. Good call.
You slept on this guy.
My bad.
And I was big as soon as he started making dents into the Atlantic Coast Conference and making a name for himself. I said this dude should be a top 10 pick. No one believed me. And here he is doing 50, 40, 90, age 27, a dunk contest competitor who tried to bring the great state of North Carolina on the map in North Carolina, doing the Wright brothers, the flight, jumping over a plane in the dunk contest. And this guy is now shooting 50, 40, 90 for the Utah Jazz. And if you look at his on-court, off-court numbers, it's one of the most positive swings in the NBA. So it's not just he's stat padding or, empty calories. This dude is genuinely making a very positive impact when he's on the floor. And this is kind of what you want for the Jazz, is not only does that make him more valuable to the Jazz, but it also makes him more valuable and marketable for other teams. And so there's one way you go about this and say, maybe this guy stays on our team and he can help us, just basically keep that credibility up, like with Markkanen and John Collins. Maybe every night we can compete with the best of teams out there. Or you can say, look, this guy is an expiring contract. He has a player option for $26 million next season. Maybe another team looks at John Collins as another guy that they can have in their rotation to, help them in a title pursuit. And so I think this is actually a really good position to be in. It's a win-win for the Jazz. You've developed him. He's been a great three-point shooter. He's a guy that, he's not Jokic out there, but his assist numbers are way up this season. And I think what you're seeing is John Collins is going to be a potential piece in a trade, or, he has a player option for next season, which I expect he's going to pick up. And you play out the string here a little bit and see how he does. This is a team that I think can probably get more for John Collins than they expected at the deadline. And the more that injuries start taking their toll on the league, you look at the Orlando Magic losing Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner to oblique strains that are going to set them back for a month plus. I think if you're the Utah Jazz, this is a pretty good situation to be in, is that you've got a couple guys in John Collins and Lauri Markkanen. He's out off the table because of the contract. But with Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton and John Collins, this is a situation where teams are going to be calling. I don't know what they're going to get for John Collins, but I would suspect that this is a case where you might decide to sell high, quote unquote, on John Collins and see what you can get for long-term assets. This is a really good season for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if, Danny Ainge's on the phone seeing how many teams could use a guy like that.
All right, away from the Jazz, a couple of questions in this direction before I set you loose. And I've never even entertained a Triple Crown NBA thought in my head. I've never even dared to even consider that, because I never thought anybody would even come close to it. And right now, Nikola Jokic is second in scoring. He's first in rebound. He's second in assists. Here's my question. We've already talked about whether or not Denver's in danger of this being an Andrew Luck in the Colts situation. For forever, and like you, I'm a lifelong basketball guy, and you'd see these stat lists released, and Wilt was on the top of all of them, most this or that of all time, points, rebounds, and you just never thought we'd see anybody who ever puts up that type of production. What will we say, Tom, to people in 20 years when they ask us, what was it like to watch Nikola Jokic play basketball?
I mean, it's probably a little bit like Ohtani in baseball. Is what was it like to see this guy playing and doing things we hadn't seen before? Playing both sides of the pitcher's mound and the batter's box, and fielding and stealing bases. This guy has no weakness. And Jokic, you can say that he's not a great defender or a defensive player of the year. We thought he wasn't a great three-point shooter. And by the way, you want to talk Triple Crown, what about the Grand Slam? He's second in the NBA in three-point field goal percentage. He's shooting over 50% from downtown. So he's one or two in four major stat categories. And by the way, he's one of the best guys in the steal column as well. He's leading, I think, almost every player in the league. He has more deflections per game than every player in the league. I think he might be second in the league in deflections too. So this guy doesn't have a weakness, and he also has never had an all-star teammate. He's never had an all-NBA, an all-defensive teammate in his entire career. Not one player to make an all-league category accolade while playing with Nikola Jokic. That's never happened in NBA history. That an MVP, a player this good, has never had a co-pilot of a similar stature. You can say Jamal Murray. You can say he's a good NBA two-guard. Michael Porter Jr., good three-point shooter. None of these guys have sniffed an all-star team. They haven't. I'll throw Aaron Gordon in there. Good player, solid player, champion now. But these guys aren't close to winning an all-star appearance. And Jokic has every right to go out and say, I need more help. And he's starting to chirp a little bit about that. He's starting to get frustrated outwardly and express some – I'm not happy about the way my supporting cast is pulling their weight, and I think it's justified. I think if any other player were this quiet about, the demands of a superstar, like wanting the front office to give him some help, I'm surprised it took this long. That's just, I guess, Jokic, who he is. But this is feeling very like 2010 Cleveland Cavaliers to me. Is like we can talk ourselves into Mo Williams and Anton Jameson, but they're not Kyrie Irving. They're not Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They're not, Anthony Davis, LeBron James. Like, he's never had anyone of that caliber. And so that's what's so crazy to me is that this dude is putting up these kind of numbers and everyone else around him is just stinking up the joint. And I thought the Russell Westbrook acquisition was a dumpster fire, was a big mistake. And it's proving to be the case that anytime he's on the floor, it's a mess. And I think Jokic, as singularly talented as he is, I think we're going to look back at him and wonder, what if this guy had a co-pilot? What if this guy, Kobe Bryant came into the NBA and there was Shaq. LeBron James didn't have that. Magic had Kareem. Magic had James Worthy. Magic had Byron Scott. All these guys. Larry Bird had all these dudes, Kevin McHale on his team that he came into the league with. And we don't have that for Jokic. So it's two things. It's one, how good is he? And two, how bad is that supporting cast? And that's what makes this situation so compelling, is that the Denver Nuggets just had two of these competing factors that we just really have never seen in NBA history.
All right, Tom, before I set you loose, I was debating whether or not, because I've got specific questions to ask you about 4 or 5 teams out west, but in the matter of time, I'm just going to ask you this. How many teams do you think can win the West this year?
Well, I think OKC is the favorite, the odds-on favorite. I think Dallas, Golden State. I'm not going to include Minnesota, Lakers, Denver. I think Houston, if they make an upgrade, I think they can win the West. But I think it's going to be a 3-horse race for me. Is Golden State, Dallas, and OKC. Memphis and Houston can jump into there, but I think this is a 3-team race.
I noticed you didn't say the Jazz. So anyway, all right. Hey, appreciate the time, man. Have an excellent week, and look forward to chatting with you next week. Okay.
All right. Enjoy it.
All right. The great Tom Haberstroh. He has a bunch of different projects. He's got a Substack called TomTheFinder.com. He writes a piece for Yahoo Sports. He also is on the Blazers analytics team. I think he has 4 different podcasts. And you get him on Twitter. Just his name, @Tom Haberstroh, is where you find him. All right, we're going to get back to some college football chatter. We started the show a little late today, so opening tip was a little truncated. We'll get back to the news that Coach Witt is back on the sidelines for Utah football next year. The latest on the transfer portal, there have been a couple of announcements during the hit I just did with Tom. So we'll get back to that and update you on the players for Utah football that are coming back and the players that are looking for a new place to play. We still have Josh Furlong and Jason Batacchio on the show. But let's welcome in Angela Peterson, Lifestyle Men's Health. Angela, happy Monday. How are you?
Happy Monday, Spence. How are you?
I'm well. So for me, with you guys over at Lifestyle Men's Health, I've utilized testosterone replacement therapy, but I forgot to mention last segment, Vitality Peptides, which is a very simple medication to take in the morning when I wake up and then at night when I get home from work. And the combination of those two, for me, a man in my mid-40s, has really helped me find more energy than I've had in 10, 15 years. What is it about what you've done for me, the vitality peptides and the testosterone therapy, that are so effective for men around my age?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, most men, these days have low testosterone. So it's definitely something you need to get evaluated and get your way to feeling better with replacement therapy. But peptides are a new area of medicine, and peptides are amino acids. And what they're going to help your body do is communicate better, make your cells work better, reverse the signs of aging, help your growth hormone release. They are really amazing. So, if you just don't feel like you're on top of your game and you feel like something could be better, reach out. We can fix it. We can make you feel better. And like we say all the time, Spence, you don't know how bad you felt until you start feeling better.
I remember when you and I first started working together, you would share with me testimonials of people, not just men, but women, as far as how their relationship has been salvaged because of the work you do with erectile dysfunction treatments over at Lifestyle Men's Health. And obviously, for ED, it's something that as an individual, now I'm lucky, not there yet. So hopefully I never have to call you for that. But as an individual, obviously causing a lot of issues, but also with your relationship, it could signify something coming to an end. So talk about how effective your ED treatments are and how they've essentially allowed people and couples to come back together.
Absolutely. Well, and that's saying it all right, Spence. It's not just one person. It's everybody in the relationship. It's very emotional. So if you don't have that connection with your partner, you're really missing out. And that should be a central aspect of your life, is to get your intimacy back. So we have regenerative therapy. We're using live stem cells. We have seen tremendous success. And we're getting people back, to where they really want to be with their sexual health. And it is possible. So, instead of asking for new irons for Christmas, come see us and, let's get your sexual health on point and get you guys, feeling good and having better intimacy in your life.
What's that special offer you have during this holiday season for folks who give you a call today?
It's still 50% off. It's our signature treatment. And then we're also including 6 months of testosterone therapy with erectile dysfunction treatment. The two go hand in hand, and it is very important to do both.
Excellent offer today, this holiday season, so take advantage of it by dialing right now. It's 385-458-9203. That's 385-458-9203, 385-458-9203, or online at lifestylemensclinic.com. Angela, thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Talk to you later.
I do a little college football. Coming up on the other side, the local stuff. Then I do want to do a little bit on the CFP bracket. Then we've got college football guests in the 4 and 5 o'clock hour with Josh Furlong and Jason Batacchio on a Monday. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. These guys had such a moment back in the 90s. And by the way, it still holds up. I will tell you this. Wasn't a big deal. Chest and back day today. You don't have to be weird about it. Okay, so just moving weight around today. Just crushing it.
As you do.
Just impressing the folk around. Feeling a little, the
How
Monday.
much you benching?
You know what? You don't need that 60, 65 pounds, both dumbbells. It's not a big deal. I mean, I am just like, exerting every piece of energy I have at the gym. And sinus infection this weekend, kind of on my back, running out of gas, moved over to the military press. I don't want to get too deep into it, kids. Text in questions if you want.
Not important.
Moved over to the military press, out of gas. That song came on, boom, instantly ready to finish the set.
Yeah, Rage will do it. I'm trying to think. Bulls on Parade is the one that does it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But they're a good lifting song. That's for sure.
Excellent
band, I should say.
Excellent band with a lot of commentary on society. Harvard grads, or I believe Harvard students that may have dropped out. Can't remember.
Something like that.
Excellent band back in the day. All right, we're going to bring in Josh Furlong, who covers the Utes for KSL. Jason Batakiao covers the Utes for the Trib. I wonder how many listeners sincerely think I'm bragging about lifting weights. My favorite bit.
There's a couple.
As you've noticed.
We've had text in before.
Oh, for sure. But as you've noticed, working with me now for a number of years, my favorite bits are the ones where people can't tell if they're real or not.
Yeah.
So I sincerely want somebody to drive into work, be like, dude.
There's someone who doesn't get the nepotism thing that you do.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And they do text in sometimes.
Just since we're on that, just please remind our listeners what the official stance of the drive is on Nepo babies.
Not fans.
Can't win with them.
No.
Can't stand them. Those are my favorite bits. I sincerely hope somebody is driving into work or driving home listening to the show and complains to their coworker or their wife about me bragging about being in the gym.
Hey.
That's what I sincerely hope.
Men's Health on the show today.
No doubt. Cold plunge this morning, whatever. A little early morning AM sunlight. Want to get the rhythm going, the circadian rhythm, so I can sleep well tonight, but that's a little too inside. All right, opening tip, a little short today because we did a long crosstalk with my guy, Zachariah. So, Porter, before I expand on my thoughts, I thought Bill Bush was really good. Bill coached with Kyle. He's down in Vegas for Alex Smith's college football induction ceremony. Most of the Utah coaches are down there, including Kyle himself. When you heard the news, whether it was the very short press release or social media or whatever, that Coach Witt is coming back, I'm going to guess that you weren't surprised because you and I have been on the same page for a couple of weeks. But now that we know that it's official, what are your thoughts on the news?
Yeah, not surprised really in the least with the actual news, and not something that I knew enough to feel comfortable reporting on, nor, Spence, would we break that news anyway. That's kind of Kyle's thing to do. But if you listen to the show, you probably heard me and you a little bit alluding to the return of Kyle Whittingham. And I don't even really think of it as a return. The guy's under contract and never really said anything about leaving. There was a lot of thought, and frankly, I think there was a good chance, a strong likelihood that if this season went really well and Utah finished, in a positive manner, I do think that Kyle would have broached that topic as he did this year at the end of the year and possibly hung it up. But as you talked about, he is a competitor. So going out like that is something that, I don't think anyone really wants to do, much less a guy who's won as many football games as I think 50 other people in the history of college football have won as many football games as Kyle. So there is a motivation to come back and end on a better note, but it's also, I want to steer away from that a little bit because it's also not just that, Spence. It's about the fact that, and you can take Kyle at his word, if you want, if you don't, maybe there's levels to it. But he talked about not wanting to leave the program in a bad spot, right? And I do think there is something to, if you leave Morgan Scalley in this offseason with, as you mentioned, an exodus of folks in the transfer portal, the chaos around college football that is the portal, the conference realignment, all of the above, I think that's a tough spot. And for the fans that are, maybe we're getting excited for a Morgan Scalley debut and maybe we're getting excited about Kyle Whittingham hanging it up, I think that's a little short-sighted as well because those fans are, well, maybe you have a short memory. If you don't remember, this team was playing in the Rose Bowl just a couple of years ago. But at the same time, I think those fans may not understand just how hard it is to get through that cycle of changing a football coach, right? Of going from Kyle Whittingham to a Morgan Scalley, whoever it may be after that. That's not a simple process, and it's one that does not come without bumps, without forks in the road, without obstacles in the road. And I think that getting the ship righted, even if it's not, Spence, a 10-plus win season, getting the ship righted in some form or fashion is not only good for the program, it's good for Morgan Scalley, and, hey, maybe good for Kyle Whittingham's ego if they go out a little bit better than they would have this year as well. That's kind of surface level, all of the angles that I can really think of. But there's a lot to it. I'm glad to see him back. I'm a Kyle guy, and I think that this team is capable, and that program is capable of going out better than 4 or 5 wins and 7 in a row in the loss column.
Couple follow-ups here. Swoop Associates. Are they trolling us, or is that a new, real thing?
Swoop Associates?
So on the press release, it says for immediate release, and the contact is Swoop Associates.
Yeah, I think that's just a little fun.
You think they're trolling us? Because when I saw the release, I'm like, do I text Swoop?
Do it.
Follow-up question?
I think Austin used to be Swoop, so we can ask him.
Oh, my gosh.
Did you forget about that?
No, I didn't forget about it. I will never forget it because I didn't know about it. And he told me because he heard a segment I did on how weird I think mascots are.
Right.
When I did an internship, non sequitur real quick, did an internship, Disney's Wide World of Sports, 1998, freshman year in college. One of the events we held were mascot tryouts for the Harlem Globetrotters. And the folks that showed up, okay, the mascots that are not in full costume, well, Austin, I love Austin, so I have to be careful here. What I said on that day, I will not repeat, but the folks that showed up to try out for the mascot of the a varied group of folk from all walk of life.
Diverse background.
Yes, but I didn't know our guy Austin was formerly Swoop, so I felt bad. Look, I can't do that stuff that mascots do.
Right.
I can barely touch my toes. I'm not doing the splits, so I respect the endeavor. It's just an interesting group. But yes, the press release said contact Swoop Associates, and I'd never seen that before.
That might just be like contact, just whatever. Don't ask us about it.
Yeah,
Jordy's leaving. Kyle's back. Forget about it.
Also the initial release said, I'm back, and then a release a little while later was edited to we're back. Did you see that?
I did see that. I saw people thinking, does that mean Cam Rising's coming back too?
Is that your fan impersonation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
With Utah fans this year, Spence, kind of. I'll be honest with you. And listen, they have right to be frustrated. They have reason to be frustrated. But some of them, man, were way overboard and entitled to apparently way more than they got this year. But that aside, yeah, I do think that that is kind of a nothing burger. That's probably Kyle saying, "Hey, this isn't me. This is us. Change that to a we," like a principle thing.
Kyle Whittingham has simply changed the expectations of the fan base for Utah football. He just has.
That's the other thing.
And when a fan base is accustomed to a certain standard, when that standard isn't met, they're going to be frustrated. Now, to your point, this year got a little loose. And I've seen the social reaction to the news that Coach Witt is coming back. I'll repeat a couple of the things I said earlier for the first segment of the show and then kind of expand upon them. I truly do not want to be the sports talk radio host that cracks a microphone and implies that Coach Witt needs to go. I don't want to be that guy, and I'm not that guy today. I haven't been that guy all year. And when a guy has basically held a very high standard for 2 decades and has changed Utah football forever and for the better, he deserves better than some of the crap that's being flung his way. However, I will say this. It is a different ask right now of the community, and it's not just Utah, it's everywhere where there's a major college football program. Look, you guys know the deal. Every time you hear a college football coach interviewed, unless it's like right after a game, if they're just doing media, like most of these guys have weekly coaches shows. Kyle has his on our station. We're the home of the Utes. They always intentionally lean into the necessity to have NIL endeavors and initiatives dialed in to where they need to be. Because if you don't have that, you can't compete. So what does that mean? It means a couple of different things. Namely, it means that as a alum, season ticket holder, booster, donor, you are hit up a lot more than you used to be hit up. It's not just buying season tickets. They want you to donate to the collective. They want you to donate to the endeavor. They want you to show up, not just physically, but financially in a way that most of this community has never been asked to do. It also means that your big-time donors and boosters have to be on board with what you are doing, and that includes who your head coach is. And I can't speak to what most of these donors and boosters feel, like namely the ones whose names are on the stadiums and the arenas. And I don't know how many million-dollar boosters Utah has. I've been told that the numbers as far as individual million-dollar boosters favor Brigham Young over Utah booster to booster. But BYU's major financial backer may not have a desire to step up financially to support the athletic department that resides in the school with which they own and operate. And that is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whose head offices are up here. I don't know what athletics are to the church. I don't. You hear all the time like, okay, it's a missionary tool. It's a missionary program. And when the day comes when the powers that be are analyzing the applications in front of them to decide whether or not they want to include your school, and namely your football program, in their new group at the Cool Kids lunch table that comprises of the 40 or whatever biggest football and most appealing football programs in the country, to break away from the NCAA and create their own governing body and essentially be another iteration of pro football. What will the church? What will the motivation of the church be? Because ultimately, that's what it's going to come down for Brigham Young. Because even if they have a couple of Silicon Slopes homies with backward hats and tight jeans that donate $1 million a year, that's not going to be enough. They're going to have to find a way, and it probably is going to have to come from the church who owns the school and therefore financially backs the football program. We did hear Kalani got a long-term contract extension. So congrats for him. And my guess would be, but I honestly don't know, and certainly can't and would never speak for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but my guess would be, based off of all the exposure that Brigham Young would receive by being one of the football teams in this new iteration of pro football, would be worth their while to pony up financially in a way that they just never have for the athletic department. I don't know that, because we do hear missionary tool. You know, the football team is a missionary tool for the school, and by proxy, the message of what the church is trying to spread to the world. That's kind of the message we've received. And, you know, one of the pieces of kind of, proof, I guess is the way I'll put it, is, you know, I can remember for years and years and years, and a couple of guys that I used to do radio with specifically that are still on air in the market, every time I would hear that a BYU football player had been kicked off the team for an honor code violation, it was like clockwork. I turn on their show the next day. They preceded my show, Afternoon Drive, the most important time slot. And all they would do is bellyache about the honor code. And they'd be like, they got to change it, man. They're going to change the honor code because a BYU linebacker got kicked out. I'm like, you're nuts. You are insane. If you think the powers that run BYU are going to change the honor code to make up for some bad behavior from athletes, then you're just not paying attention. Because we do this thing in sports, and I'm certain I do it as well, because it's the ecosystem in which I exist, where we think it's more important to the greater good than it actually is. You know, when you look at some of the ratings and some of the numbers, Super Bowl gets 80 to 100 million eyes. That's amazing. But the majority of our country still doesn't watch the most watched athletic endeavor that we have. So you have to kind of understand where it's at with the scale of importance. And certainly with BYU. It's a different dynamic and a lot of complications and layers. Utah is in a different spot, though. And I do think there are some things in place behind the scenes, and Utah's not going to be the only school that does this, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to look. But there will be this influx of private equity money. There will be tech bros, finance bros. There will be, VCs, private equity, guys in the financial sector lined up. And already, by the way, by some admission, there are private equity firms and hedge funds and VCs and such kicking the tires to try to purchase a portion of college football teams in exchange for a massive amount of economic infusion up front immediately. And we'll just throw this out for frame of reference, not saying this is set in stone, but something like a private equity fund and their financial backers and partners buying 48% of Ohio State football in exchange for, $500 million up front in cash right away. There you go, Ohio State. Here's $500 million. We now own about 48% of your program. You maintain majority ownership, but we have this massive investment because we believe, and this is the deal, when college football moves into the pro model, that television contract will pay our investment back dozens of times over, and we are going to make a grip of money. Because it's amazing right now that college football brings in the revenue that it does, and you turn on the TV on Saturday, it's Alabama against Furman or whatever, or Georgia against UMass. Can you imagine what the TV deal will look like when every week it's blue blood versus blue blood? Every Saturday, it's Georgia versus Bama. Every Saturday, it's Michigan, Miami. Every Saturday, hopefully, it's Utah, Texas, or whatever. Like, that's going to be the reality of what this thing looks like. And to bring it back around before we break, because of the necessity of these deep-pocketed, influential people to be a part of your endeavor to be prepared for this reality, you better be in lockstep with them about what you're doing with your football team. And that includes the head coach. For me, I think it's great that Kyle's back one more year, and I believe that he has earned the right to let us know when he's done. All right, Josh Furlong, more on this coming up with Josh Furlong. Also, haven't even scratched the surface with a lot of the content I wanted to get to. So we'll do some CFP bracket thoughts, Isaac Wilson to the transfer portal. There's some updates on some Utes that are also in the transfer portal. So we'll get to that. So Josh Furlong, Jason Batacchio, that's your 4 o'clock hour on a Monday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Monday Night Football tonight. It is the Bengals and the Cowboys. That will wrap up your Week 14 in pro football. Stay tuned for that game. After we say goodnight, we also have the Craig Smith Coaches Show starting at 6 o'clock. So stay tuned for that. Let's do more college football, though. Friend of the show, Josh Furlong, covers the Utes over at KSL on a Monday. Josh, happy Monday, man. How we doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Spence?
I'm doing well. Obviously a massive, massive news weekend, so let's get right to it. I can't speak for you, nor will I. For me, I started really landing in the space of Kyle coming back next year, of Coach Witt being back on the sideline next year, around the BYU loss. His comments after that game, and then his media the following Monday. I just remember being struck about just the way he was delivering his message, the pragmatism, already talking about some of the things that they needed to do to get this thing turned around. And look, he's a coach under contract. We didn't need an announcement. He could have just come back, but we get the press release, the short press release that he's back. What's the Josh Furlong take on this?
Yeah, it was kind of a up and down ride this year. About that same time, I kind of had the same thought that he was coming back as well. But then it kind of waned. And honestly, going into that UCF game, I was convinced that he was done. The vibe of the game, there's fans chanting his name on the sidelines. Like everything built up to he was going to walk away. The press conference was kind of there, the way that they said goodbye to each other and everything. It was just kind of like this weird vibe that felt like this was the end for him. And then, in the days after that, it quickly changed where I was starting to hear that, no, he might actually come back. And it became a foregone conclusion that he was going to do it. So, I think it's a good thing, though. I mean, I know there's been some segment of the fan base that has been frustrated by it because they want to move on to Morgan, and for good reason. But when you get, the winningest coach of all time that's going to stay, he's doing the right things in terms of wanting to change what wasn't working. I think that sends a message that he's all in, right? Like, I think he shows that he's committed and he's going to do what he can to try to make the best of it and try to go out on a better note.
So let me follow up, because to your point, I've been a little bit surprised at the pushback of the community to this news, and not just the online pushback, hearing from other people off the interwebs, not just folks that live online, that just kind of feel like it might be time for a new voice, or it might be time. And look, I really wonder where Morgan is on this. And ultimately, if Morgan was asked, exactly what he would say, that he's thrilled to continue to learn under his mentor. And obviously Morgan's going to say that publicly. I just wonder what the nature is of a guy who clearly has turned down other opportunities to at some point take this thing over, which he will, and he's still a very young guy. So, but I have been a little bit surprised at the pushback to this news. Let's elaborate on that from your vantage point a little bit more. I don't know if you want to put a percentage on it, but does it feel like, from your vantage point in your prism and where you exist, there are a lot of people that didn't react the way you were expecting to the news that Kyle is coming back?
I mean, it was more than I would have expected. So, I'd say 25% was probably the number I would say. But it was a little more than I was expecting on something like that. But I get it, right? I think there comes a time where some coaches can hang on too long and try to hold on to something that they may never obtain. I don't think that's where Kyle's at personally. The fire burns within him. He's ready to go. This isn't somebody that's slipping necessarily. There was mismanagement this year, right? I think there's things that can be fixed, and I think there's, I think fans that are really frustrated are probably pointing to the offensive side of the ball, where Kyle's a defensive coach. He's always been a defensive coach, and for the early part of his coaching tenure, he was going through offensive coordinators almost on a yearly basis, and so. Utah kind of reverted back to that kind of mindset in some respects of not being able to have a competent offense. And I think they saw missteps from Whittingham, whether that's merited or not. I think that's what people are pointing to. And so I think that just becomes a challenge, right? I think overall people are happy to have him because obviously he's an icon, and he brings a lot of cachet to the college football world that you can't really replace. He's the second leading active coach, right now. So, I mean, this isn't like some guy that's just trying to hang on for too long. But I think you're starting to see people that are willing to kind of let that era come to an end. They want to be able to have, a younger voice. They want somebody that is maybe more closer to the age of the athletes. Not that Morgan is that much closer, but obviously Morgan has a great deal of respect with the athletes. They love him, they respect him, and they want to be able to kind of move on with that. So, I think that audience is growing day by day, but I still think it's of the minority type.
So when you and I last spoke, there was a vacancy at the offensive coordinator spot for Utah. It's been filled. Jason Beck will be the OC, is the OC moving forward. Before we get into the ancillary storylines, just in a vacuum, what's your reaction to the hire?
Honestly, I think this is one of the best hires they could have made. And obviously, there's a lot of attractive names out there when you're going and doing this. I think some people kind of they see that he was a BYU guy, and that kind of changes their opinion on him. But honestly, I think he's a great mind. He comes in here wanting to be able to really fit an offense that fits the skill sets of his players, so he can do what he needs to. He can be flexible. He wants to create a simple offense that's based in the spread. He wants a mobile quarterback. It's pretty similar to what most programs are using, and so it's much easier, whether that be through the transfer portal, coming from the high school ranks, or whatever it may be, to be able to have this offense that kind of clicks with players. At the end of the day, whatever Jason Beck wants to be able to run, it's going to come down to what Kyle Whittingham kind of gives him that leeway to. But at the same time, Kyle has pushed to that level of, we've got to have something that's more accessible. We've got to have something that's more plug and play. And that's what Jason Beck is. He's still relatively unproven to some extent in the sense that he's only been an offensive coordinator for 2 years at 2 different schools. But I think with what you've seen, especially with what you can do at a place like New Mexico, which is just not a hotbed for football, it shows what he's capable of doing. And if you can get some buy-in, and if you can get belief that Jason Beck can do it, there's a real possibility that Utah can absolutely turn this thing around. And now you pair that with an elite defense, and suddenly you've got this team that everybody's happy about again. All the problems go away, and I think that helps. So I think there's a lot of optimism here. I know a lot of people kind of get worried where it's just like you can't get out of the BYU Utah coaching tree, but I think this is different. I think it's different enough that he's friends with Scally, he's got his approval. I think this is a good thing all around, and I think this helps Utah.
All right. According to your reporting, Ben Arbuckle, Mac Leftwich, both, according to you and others who cover this day to day in a way that I just don't, so that I kind of concede to you on this stuff. Ben goes to Oklahoma. Mac goes to Texas Tech. Folks were upset, wailing, gnashing of teeth. How real was Utah's interest? How close were either of those hires to actually happening here in Salt Lake?
I mean, both were close, in their own right. The Arbuckle one was probably not as close as the Leftwich, simply because Arbuckle was using Utah probably more as leverage to get to Oklahoma. There were legit conversations, though, and there was a real possibility that Utah could land him. I just think if Oklahoma came calling, and they did, that was going to be their destination. With Leftwich, there was definitely enough conversations where he came to town. They had conversations, contract negotiations broke down ultimately. But at the end of the day, he was always a Texas guy. He always wanted to be in Texas. He was at Texas State, and now he's at Texas Tech. To get him out of Texas was going to be a tough challenge. And so I think maybe, I don't know the exact details, but maybe he drove a hard bargain, right? Where he wanted to be able to have something that if you're going to take me out of Texas, I want this, and Utah wasn't willing to budge. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think they got the guy that's pretty similar to all of those guys, right? Like, they're different in their own respects. And the other two, there was a real, desire to have them as the offensive coordinator. But I don't know that you get any difference out of, a Jason Beck. It's just not as it doesn't come from a school that has as flashy of a name or anything. And so I think that maybe detracts people from that. But I think it's still a great situation. Obviously they would have done really well with Leftwich. They would have done well with Arbuckle. But I think this is a good spot for Utah. Having it be their third choice, if that's really what it was, is really not a bad choice at all.
So a tweet kind of made the rounds from Corey Detmer, who has changed his Twitter bio to the quarterbacks coach for Utah football. Do you have any insight as to what this means, if it's real? I haven't seen anything official.
Yeah, he's not the quarterbacks coach, from what I understand. That'll be Jason Beck. So he's going to be the OC and QB coach. What he's going to come in is he's going to be more of an offensive analyst. And so this will be similar to kind of what Mike Bajakian was with Andy Ludwig. So he'll come in here. This falls under the new NCAA rules where analysts can help coach. This allows, Beck to be able to oversee the entirety of the offense, still focus in on the QBs, but have kind of his right-hand man to be able to help them and just focus on them specifically. So it's just another asset. It's a great opportunity for them to be able to have more resources to the quarterback. He's been with him at New Mexico, so, they have a great connection. They coached together previously as well. So this is a great opportunity for them to be able to have some consistency there, but Beck is the QB coach.
I do wonder if, and I honestly don't know, I'm just wondering aloud if either Kyle or Jason or whoever had a bit of a Deion Sanders moment and told a bunch of kids like, hey, it's probably better for you to go if you want to play somewhere. I have no clue, but it was pretty quick as far as what I saw that all three of the quarterbacks, specifically Isaac Wilson, Brandon Rose, Sam Heward, got gone after the announcement of the offensive coordinator was made official, and even a little bit after Coach Witt said he was coming back. And look, I've found the reaction to this somewhat interesting because you have and I hate doing the online thing, I really do, but you have a faction of football fans in this market that love Utah football that were screaming about how bad the quarterback play was when Cam went down, and then it seemed like a lot of them were screaming when those said quarterbacks decided they were leaving. I'm like, well, what exactly do you guys want here? But bottom line, all three of those guys into the transfer portal. Josh, what do you make of Isaac, Brandon, and Sam getting gone pretty quickly in concurrent with those coaching announcements?
Yeah, that's honestly my favorite thing with this kind of stuff. All year, I was getting messages about how this quarterback was terrible and we need to upgrade and we need to do this. But the second they go into the transfer portal, it suddenly changes. And now, Utah is a trash program. Nobody's ever going to commit to Utah. It's funny how it goes. And I get it, right? Fans are fans and they want to be able to react to it. But I think this is a combination of things, right? Where the quarterbacks are seeing that they need a new start. It's also Utah saying it wasn't working for us and we need to reset on everything. So whether those conversations were kind of a nudge or whether they just went out on their own is probably about the same. Ultimately, Utah wanted to be able to have a full reset on offense. And obviously there's players that they need to keep. But I think it's fair to the quarterbacks to just kind of move on, right? I look at somebody like an Isaac Wilson, who obviously came in as this highly touted player, a lot of potential, and everybody wanted him to succeed. Based on the way the season went, he was kind of the scapegoat for a lot of the problems, and a lot of them were on him, right? But I can't imagine him trying to come back for another year as a sophomore, whether he's the starter or whether he's a backup, trying to get back to the good graces of the fan base in that kind of world. I mean, that's a very difficult situation to kind of navigate. And whether you agree with how it was handled or not, it doesn't really matter. I think the point is, this was a tough situation for all quarterbacks involved, and it didn't go ideal because they honestly felt like Cam Rising was going to be the guy. And so when you have all of these guys put into a position that really wasn't beneficial to who they were or kind of the timeline they were expecting, it really changed everything for everybody. And so a reset, meaning them leaving and them trying to find a greener pasture somewhere else, I think is a good thing for both parties. I think this gives Utah a great opportunity to find new talent, kind of reset on who they want to be, let Beck have a clean slate on what he wants to do, but lets them, find somewhere where they can be appreciated and maybe kind of reinvent themselves into who they want to be. So all in all, I mean, it fits into what their plan is on the offensive side of the ball. It is unfortunate, you can look at the mismanagement at QB, and there are some real gripes about that. But I think at the end of the day, this is probably the best thing to be able to move forward and just kind of cut your losses.
What is your current understanding on the status of Cam Rising?
Yeah, my understanding, it hasn't really changed much, is that he's not intending to enroll at Utah. I know there was some conversations, especially late, of him potentially staying. I don't think it was for starter reps. I haven't gotten that one solidified. But at the end of the day, it was always going to be a tough pull to get him there. I think just the way everything ended and kind of the relationships that had gone on, it's not that he doesn't like Utah or anything that way, but I think it was a tough sell to be able to kind of put him back into that system, whether that be through NIL or in the locker room or anything there. I think everybody, just kind of similar to that last comments about the quarterbacks. It was time to move on. And so whether that's Cam's choice or Utah's choice, I think it was kind of a dual thing to be able to say this is not where we think it's going to last.
Well, and I tend to agree with that. And regardless of what happens with Cam, Utah needs a quarterback. They probably need two, and they might need three. And a lot of people draw a straight line between Jason Beck and Devin Dampier, who had a really dynamic season for New Mexico a year ago. Then there's Eli Sanders, who was the running back in New Mexico, and Luke Weissong, their leading receiver. All three of them in the transfer portal. You got any inside info about whether or not we could see one, two, or maybe all three in Salt Lake?
Yeah, I mean, I know of at least two of them that, generally speaking, would like to be in Utah. I know Devin Dampier. It does feel like things have progressed that way, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get that commitment here soon. How soon, it depends. But I know there is a lot of smoke that way, and I think it's merited because I think that works. I know Eli Sanders would be a great target here and wants to be here. Luke Weissong, I'm not entirely sure. That one's the one that I haven't got as much noise on or been able to talk to people about. But I think if you could get somebody like Devin Dampier who understands Beck's system, can mature and grow. I mean, he was only a sophomore and did all that he did as a true dual threat quarterback. I mean, that gives you great opportunity. If you can get Eli Sanders to come in and fill some of that running backs room, that helps. But I know Utah also has some other targets that they're trying to go with. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of how these things work out. I don't know if they're going to want him to delay announcing or if there's going to be different things to try to get other people. There's always a lot of behind the scenes stuff that tries to help other people commit so that you don't lose out somebody and all that other nonsense. But it sounds like there could be definitely some pieces moving with Beck from New Mexico. And if it is the QB, I mean, I think that's a great opportunity for Utah.
I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but let's stick with the transfer portal news, but go away from the quarterback room. I just want the Josh Furlong take on the losses that will sting. Ute players have decided to leave, and the guys that have announced that they're coming back that Ute fans should know about and be excited about.
Yeah, first off, coming back, I mean, I think Landon King just barely announced that he's coming back, and I think that for at least, skills players, that's great. Being able to secure Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu, your two tackles, that is probably the biggest news of the entire thing. Being able to have them, that helps. So there have been some successes there and being able to keep some guys, and I think they're great pieces to be able to build around. In terms of guys that sting losing them, Carson Ryan, he's another tight end that announced. He's a Utah kid. Transferred from UCLA, wanted to come into Utah and really kind of make it their home. And, he got a lot of playing time, but just didn't really get a lot of action, catching the ball or anything. I don't know that it's a huge loss, but I think in terms of what he could have been, it can be. Obviously the QBs we talked about. I think more than anything, it's just depleting of rooms, right? For example, all of your running backs outside of Mike Mitchell are gone. Those are going to hurt. But beyond that, I don't know that there's one guy that's necessarily like, oh my gosh, that's going to be a real hurt as of right now. Outside of maybe a Carson Ryan, I think this was all necessary. As I said, with the offensive side of the ball, there needed to be a real reset, and you hung on to the players that you felt like could be the best, and that helps you. So as of right now, it hasn't been too bad for Utah. The defense has stayed relatively intact, and you've kept guys. So all in all, I'd say it's probably okay, even though there has been a ton of players leave. The biggest bulk of that is the seniors that have left. That's probably your biggest impact players that have been off of the roster.
So one more thing here before we move off the Utes. I mean, I've got some data in front of me. It looks like Utah, as of now, 14 scholarship players have entered the portal. And, no commits yet, but the thing just opened, so it'll take some time to kind of understand how many players they can add. But if you compare that to most of the data I have in front of me, is it fair to say that even though, there's a good chance Isaac Wilson goes somewhere else, maybe learns in a year or two, takes a job and kills it, and, some other players maybe stink, but overall it doesn't feel like Utah has been decimated by the transfer portal compared to some of the other schools that have 18, 19, 20, 21 kids that have entered as far as the data I have in front of me?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some schools, maybe quite to the level of Colorado where it's like 40, 50 players, but there's a lot of schools that are going anywhere from 20 to 30 players in the portal on a year-to-year basis and trying to be able to change that. So Utah's definitely not that. It does feel like there's a lot of players entering, but for the most part, these are guys that they weren't getting a ton of reps. They wanted to find new opportunities. And so I don't know that there's a ton of people that you've lost that are going to be huge impact players, at least as of right now. A lot of these guys have potential and they can do a lot of great things. But I don't think Utah's lost any that are that level. And quite honestly, over the last few years of the transfer portal, Utah's done a relatively good job of upgrading from the portal. They've gotten some good guys in there, been able to really shore up some of the position groups that they need to with that help. And so they understand how to identify talent. Obviously, it's not a perfect system, and you bring in some guys and they don't fit, or they don't get beat out by somebody else. But by and large, Utah has done relatively well here. Utah fans would like to hope that it's like a Arizona State type comeback, right, where you have guys that can come in, you can plug and play, and immediately work next year. So it's been good for Utah, and I think they're trending towards that right now. It is still early, but I think everything's going well so far for Utah.
All right, Josh, before we set you loose, let's get a quick men's basketball thought from you. I watched the St. Mary's game. They're getting trounced early and then came back. I mean, St. Mary's, that's a good team. That's a good basketball team. They're like the mid-major model. Of course, Utah's not a mid-major. But Craig made some changes at halftime, and it was like a 5-point game with a couple minutes left. Utah could never recover from that big deficit. And look, the Big 12, no matter what the non-con says, is going to be a bear. But St. Mary's, Mississippi State, the two L's, clearly the two best teams they've played so far. And they're going to see Radford and Florida A&M. Iowa will be a decent test. And then it is on. How prepared would you say Craig's team is for this Big 12 adventure ahead?
I don't think they're as far along the progress as I thought they'd be based on what we've seen earlier. Even in that Mississippi State game, I think they had a lot more fight, especially throughout the duration of the game. I think what's frustrating to Craig is that there was a lot of guys that kind of hung their head after that first half, and they kind of already beat themselves, and so he had to switch some lineups that maybe aren't what he's used to playing or kind of ideal, but he had to get guys in there that wanted to play and wanted to fight. And so that to me is going to give me some pause, right? I think he has the right roster that can help there. We talked about this a couple weeks ago where if they can get to be 10th in the league, I think that's still a sign of progress. But I think it's this type of stuff. They're going to face some incredibly tough tests this year. And you're going to have those bad first halves. Every team has it to some extent, but you've got to be able to fight through that. And so I think we're learning more about that, the guys that want to fight. I mean, Caleb Lohner obviously is still raw coming from football now, but I think it was nice to be able to see some physicality. Utah hasn't had a ton of that physicality where there's going to be a guy that just goes in there and goes toe-to-toe with anybody out there. They need some of those guys to fight. They need, obviously, the Madsons to be able to do well, but they need some physicality and they need some fight. And so as long as that happens, I think they can be there, but it was definitely a discouraging sign in that first half to see this team just kind of wilt and not really kind of get involved and just let St. Mary's push them around. So I guess it's still TBD, but with 3 games left in the non-conference schedule, it's coming quickly, and suddenly Baylor's going to be on that schedule, and it's going to be a tall task.
All right, man. Appreciate the time. What a crazy weekend, and never short of storylines with college football. So have a great week, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, Josh.
Appreciate it.
All right, Josh Furlong covers the Utes for KSL. Get him on Twitter at JFurKSL is where you find him. Brought to you today by Advanced Window Products. Going to be on remote tomorrow with our friends at Advanced Window Products. Nate Orchard, Jake Weber, great people. It's the #1 rated window company in Utah. They're locally owned, and the sales and installation are in-house. What that means is no middleman markup. So you'll save a grip of money, and they build, install, and guarantee for life. And you can transfer that warranty to a new homeowner if you are planning on selling your home. You can save energy with custom rebates from Dominion Energy. They've got great financing options. So if your budget's not what you need it to be right now, you can buy now and pay later. It's their winter football special this week, which is $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more. You can beat the rush and order today from the factory to your front door in 8 weeks or less. Give them a call at 801-850-9100 and visit them at advancedwindows.com. Advanced Window Products, that's 801-850-9100 and advancedwindows.com. All right, more college football. Our buddy Jason Batakia. It's been a minute, but he covers these for the Trib. He joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. I need 46 points from Joe Burrow tonight to beat my nephew in the first round of our family fantasy football playoffs. Can I get 46 points from Joe Burrow tonight?
46. That's a lot, right?
My cousin,
my fantasy like point stuff is rusty.
That's a lot. Josh Allen had like 54, which was a record, I think.
Ooh.
And my nephew's 10.
Not against this Cowboys defense.
I had to. So, did the Cowboys have a shot tonight, or is it just over?
I mean, they do. The Cowboys have a shot because of the players they have on their roster. But we get into the last 2 minutes of a game, and who knows what that team's going to do?
Is their defense still any good?
Their
Cowboys defense is still decent.
Their defense is decent. They have some players on that team that they're going to make plays. Right, Micah Parsons is going to make his impact on the game, but they're not consistent enough, and their offense puts them on the field a bunch.
All right, fair enough. Monday Night Football, you can hear it on our radio station following the Craig Smith's Coaches Show, which comes your way when we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. We've got about 90 minutes left, and most of it is all college. I should say all of it's college football, starting with our guy. It's been way too long. Jason Batacchio, Salt Lake Tribune, covers the Utes. Jason, happy Monday, buddy. How we doing?
Doing good, man. Just got some grocery shopping done and enjoying having no Monday Night Football media availabilities, to be quite frank with you. But no, it's a nice change of pace to have, Saturdays off and all that stuff. Now it's on to spring sports. How have you guys been?
We're good, man. I've got to ask you where you been. As Falk said, you're not allowed to come on my show. Did Falk put the axe? Did he say you're not allowed to go on Spence's show all year?
No, man, not at all. I've just been so busy with different things, just with reporting on stories and just, I don't know. I always get caught up in some random stuff, and so I apologize. I need to be better about coming on the show for sure. That's totally on me. It has nothing to do with Falk at all.
Okay. Any opportunity I have to throw Falk under the bus, I'll take, Jason. You have to understand that. But we can move on. All right, really busy weekend. Let's start with the news that Coach Witt will be back on the sidelines, year 21. For me, and I've been talking about this all day, but last offseason, more than a handful of people who are more plugged in than I am, closer to Kyle than I am, really believe this was it. This was his swan song. Good roster, favorite to win the Big 12, chance to make the CFP. Of course, none of that came to fruition. And here we are with Kyle announcing he's coming back now for year 21. What do you think, Jason? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, at the beginning of the season, I did a profile on Kyle, and, I talked to tons of members of his family, his son, his mom, a few others. But honestly, their vibe was kind of like, I was going back through the audio last night, and they said something prudent that I think kind of stands now. It's like, they don't even know when Kyle was going to retire. And a lot of people, like you said, it seemed like it was going that direction with Kyle, it being his last year with a swan song season, a potential college football playoff bid, and so forth. But, one thing that stood out that they told me was, Kyle's a competitive guy, and he, if this season doesn't go the way he wanted to, which it didn't very obviously, the chances for him coming back are pretty high. And so, I kind of felt like it was coming, especially just this week, from different things, I picked up on, the video of Kyle making a phone call to a recruit, that was kind of a big telltale sign for me. And, he's been running a lot of the meetings, Jason Beck's announcement. It said Kyle Whittingham announces the hire of Jason Beck. So there was just kind of like little tidbits that could tell that, like, okay, this is happening in this direction. But in terms of the outlook for next year, I think it's incredibly interesting because you see a massive, I guess, surge of legacy coaches getting pushed out of the game with NIL, with the transfer portal. And so far, Kyle's been, quick to adjust, but, he's also kind of been the only coach that's been at a program for such a long time that has stuck around with the portal. So I think this offseason is going to be really telling as to, where is this team's direction going? What does Kyle Whittingham want to do with the offense? with Jason Beck under the helm and so forth. But I don't really know. I feel like it could go both ways. I think Kyle's, a proven winner. The past 2 seasons have been kind of probably some of the more tougher years of his career just with the offense and Cam Rising's injuries and so forth. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. I really think it comes down to, what kind of quarterbacks can they get in the portal, what kind of skill players and, how much money is Utah really willing to spend given the limitations that they have with NIL and so forth. So, yeah, it's my long-winded answer.
Love it. Love it. It's radio, Jason. You got to understand, the longer your wind is, the more I have left for the 4 hours every day. That's my favorite type of guest. You be long-winded, brother. You referenced Jason.
Awesome.
You referenced Jason Beck. So after flirting with a couple of other candidates, and I do want your thoughts on how real it was with the Arbuckle stuff, and obviously you're familiar with Oklahoma. Ben ends up there, and the rumors about flirting and potentially offering others, but they land on Jason Beck. Before we get to the ancillary storylines, namely his players in the transfer portal, what's your understanding of how badly Utah wanted to pursue the other 2 that were ahead of him, and what are your thoughts on them landing on what reports seem to indicate are their 3rd choice for their OC?
I think it's pretty obvious that, Arbuckle and Leftwich were the 2 primary candidates, because I think going into, the final 2 weeks of the season, I mean, it was Kyle's goal to have an offensive coordinator on or before signing day. And obviously they didn't get that completely done. But, we all picked up on the reports of Arbuckle being the primary candidate, and ultimately he landed at Oklahoma. Whether or not that was a leverage push to, kind of use Utah as like a leverage push in Oklahoma, for him to ultimately go in Oklahoma's favor. I don't know that completely, but, I've noticed some people have speculated on that. And, Leftwich, it seemed like they wanted him bad as well. But, ultimately they landed on Jason Beck, and it seems like he's a good candidate. He's young, 44, not younger than me, obviously. I'm 22, but, 44 in the coaching world is still pretty young. He has a kind of like Kyle said, it seems like a plug and play system. It's easy to understand where, with Andy Ludwig's system, it's an NFL style offense, lots of motion, lots of under center looks, lots of, complex reads that, obviously quarterbacks, if they're going to transfer in or they're a true freshman, it's hard for them to tackle on day one. And so I think the Beck hire is good. I don't know if it was their primary choice or not, especially with the noise that we heard around Ben Arbuckle and Mac Leftwich. But in Utah's, I guess to be more sympathetic to Utah, I guess Arbuckle was a top candidate around the nation, and it seemed like it came down to Utah and Oklahoma, and just knowing Oklahoma, they can outspend anybody. They're one of the money hungry teams or money heavy teams in the SEC. With the same thing, I guess you could say could happen with Mac Leftwich. I mean, Texas Tech's got a bunch of money-heavy oil donors, so that's something that Utah does not have. I bet they wish it was something that they had, but they don't have that currently. So, I think ultimately, they'll probably end up looking back at this as like, okay, this is the the candidate that they could ultimately get and land on. And, he's, like I said, he's young and he's everything that, Utah wanted heading into this portal season and, new world of plug and play and just all that stuff. So, yeah.
So I don't know if these things are related, but it's easy to draw conclusions. I'm not sure if Jason Beck or Kyle Whittingham or Morgan Scalley or whoever went Deion Sanders on their quarterback room mostly, or the rest of the players. But we hear Jason's announcement. We hear Kyle's coming back. Then, boom, Isaac Wilson, Brandon Rowe, Sam Heward, all gone. So your thoughts on now what is a barren quarterback room, and attendant to it, do you have any up-to-date information Monday at 4:45 this afternoon about the future of Cameron Rising?
I've checked in with a few people on Cam, haven't heard anything back. I think beyond the tea leaves, I mean, I think Cam's, if I were to speculate, and this is clearly speculation, so I just want to throw that out there, it seems like Cam's tenure with Utah is done. I think I think with just the injuries, all the drama of just, is he a game time decision? Is he not? The groundswell of Utah fans being upset of not knowing whether or not he's going to play, and whether that was a Kyle Whittingham thing or a Cam Rising thing. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But yeah, I think Cam is still kind of weighing his options, and I think it's interesting because, we look at quarterback market, it's kind of like the NFL now. If you have a lot of injuries, are people willing to pay you nowadays with so many starting caliber guys, flooding the market? And, he has this tape from 3 years ago, and then he was one of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation. But, the guy hasn't played in 2.5, or he's only played in 2.5 games the past 3 years. And so, if I'm a college program with $1 million, $2 million, maybe $3 million willing to spend on a quarterback, I think there's probably a lot of hesitancy in the transfer portal market right now. And, whether or not he could make his mark in the NFL, like I said, I'll let you guys be the judge on that. But I think genuinely he's still weighing his options just from, somebody on the outside looking in. In terms of Utah's quarterback situation as a whole, I mean, I think this is kind of what Kyle Whittingham wanted, a blank slate, the opportunity to rebuild his offense under Jason Beck and kind of, retool alongside his, power defense that is always top 10 in the conference seemingly every season. And, that's kind of been the issue for Utah the past 2 years, to put it simply. I mean, other than injuries. And so, I know there's a lot of strong interest with Utah and Devin Dampier, but for right now, it seems like, maybe Utah could get outbid in that area because there's some SEC teams that have interest. So, that was kind of the primary reason from what I heard for Isaac Wilson leaving, just because, if Utah brings in Dampier, I could say it's a quarterback competition, but the guy knows Beck's system. He has 2 years of eligibility left. And, I mean, it's kind of a foregone conclusion for him ultimately to be the starter, but, every quarterback competition comes down to the coaches. So I'm not saying that wouldn't be, but I think it's kind of a blank slate, Utah is going to bring in some guys. Who knows whether or not, maybe the Brandon Rose or the Isaac Wilsons or, there's still always an opportunity for those guys to come back. It's not a foregone conclusion if somebody enters the portal for them to ultimately leave. But, I think Utah's just looking at a fresh slate right now, and they're really going to go hard after a few guys in the portal. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on everything. Sorry to not have any up-to-date information on Cam. So, yeah.
All good. I do want to follow up about Devin Dampier, though. And as you referenced, there seems to be a lot of schools kind of hot on his heels. And look, I'm not going to ask you if Utah's interested. That'd be a dumb thing to ask because, of course, they are. He played for their offensive coordinator, so they're probably in the mix. They probably would like to have him on campus. Here's what I'll ask, Jason, and if you don't have anything here, I understand because it's hard to get this information. Is Utah in a position where if Devin gets a sizable offer from a blue-bloodish type school, Utah can at least be competitive financially to be in the mix to land him in Salt Lake?
That's a very good question. And I think it's the, biggest question for Big 12 teams like a Utah. Can they compete in the NIL world with, the SEC teams and the Big 10 teams? And, honestly, I don't know if I have an answer to that question. I know, their revenue share total is probably going to be close to $10 to $12 million. And their budget this year was $6 million, give or take, which isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. But, you think you're like, okay, well, now they have potentially $12 million. At least that's what I've heard is $10 to $12 million is their rev share cap. And that gets a lot of the football, but you think about that across the nation, every other team's going to be mostly, if not all in on revenue sharing. And maybe they have higher margins, maybe they have lower margins in that frame. But alongside that, SEC teams are finding ways to, have third-party deals, whether it be, booster-based sponsorships that kind of go under the guise of a collective or a third-party marketing agency. So yeah, I think Utah can put in a competitive offer, but say a program offers $3 million for a guy like Devin Dampier, and who knows what his market looks like. I don't know if Utah would be willing to offer him that much money, because they offered what Cam Rising made $1.5 million or $2 million. So maybe Devin Dampier is in that market. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. They also are probably going to have to pay, or already are paying their two, All-American left tackles, and Spencer Fano, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name. I don't know why. But yeah, it's an interesting situation to say the least. You look at the revenue sharing cap and you think, well, Utah's getting more money, but when water rises, all boats float with it or something. I'm trying to think of a good
rising tide, pal. Rising tide there.
Yeah, rising tide. Yeah. And so I don't know. I think that's an interesting question. I would probably say yes, just knowing the type of money that they gave Cam Rising. But it's a different world now with revenue sharing and the guise of third-party collective deals that are still allowing millions and millions of dollars to flow in, as kind of a circumvent, as Kyle said a couple weeks ago, that I thought was funny. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. But yeah.
So as of now, 14 scholarship players have entered the transfer portal, besides quarterback, where they probably need more than one, and probably two, maybe even three. What other areas on the roster, Jason, in your opinion, do you think they look for to add talent to? Which rooms are the most barren right now?
Yeah, I would say running back is a major need for Utah right now. I mean, outside of Mike Mitchell, you have absolutely nobody. I mean, Jalen Glover's in the portal. John Randall, who slotted in at some cornerback, this season, is in the portal. I'm trying to think of who else. Mekhi Bernard's, out of eligibility. They've really, really got to, hit the portal hard, in my opinion, at that position. And I think kind of going back to the NIL framework of kind of this piece, it's like, Big 12 programs for the most part are handicapped financially. They're not like Big 10 programs. They're not like SEC programs where they get this massive TV contract and massive donors. To kind of look at what Colorado did this season, they paid Travis Hunter a lot of money. They paid Shedeur Sanders a lot of money. I'm sure Arizona State's paying Cam Scatabo a lot of money. It's like, I think with Utah, you either got to choose a receiver, a quarterback, or one of the two, or a receiver, running back, or one of the two. You know what I'm saying? And so, I think they kind of have to be a bit judicious of like, okay, what kind of running back are they going to go after? Is Mike Mitchell somebody that they think can come in and be RB1 this year? And he's been hampered with injuries this season, so maybe you say no to that question. But they have Racine Gollery, I think his name is, coming in. He's a 4-star, so a really talented kid, but that's a freshman. You really gonna trust that freshman running back to come in and handle the load of your offense? And we know Kyle Whittingham, he likes to run the ball a lot. So I would say running back, and then obviously receiver. You're losing Dorian Singer. Zacharias Williams showed a lot of flashes in the Houston game. He's somebody I think you could probably slot in. They're losing Money Parks. I think honestly their major needs are at all the skill positions on offense, which is why, again, I go back to it being a clean slate. You gotta get a high level receiver in the portal. You got to get a starting quarterback in the portal. And you got to get, whether it be a tandem running back group or, a different level of versatile running backs, whether it's, that third down guy that can go in between the guards and get you 2 to 3 yards on every single play, or, home run threat. I think all of those are needs, and it'll be interesting to see how, given, the new salary cap and given revenue sharing, to see how Utah kind of goes about that framework, I guess you could say. So, yeah.
All right, last thing, Jason, then I'll set you loose, and we'll kind of, we'll bring it back down to the beginning of the interview, bring it back around, I should say, to the beginning of the interview with the news that Coach Witt is returning. And, I don't live on the internet. I don't want to live on the internet. But, when you do this for a job and when you do what you do for a job, you kind of have to have some sort of presence there. And my presence is not near what it was back in the day. I mostly just check. I'm more of just like an observer. And then I go on and live my life. But I will say I've been surprised at both the social media reaction and the real life reaction from a larger number of people that feel like it's time to make the transition from Kyle to Morgan than I expected. Now, my personal opinion is over the course of 2 decades, Kyle Whittingham is the best football coach we've had in the state, probably. Lavelle Edwards would be the other name to throw in that conversation, and he has earned the right to tell us when he's done. But it feels like there's a faction of the community that does not feel that way. Has that been your experience with the reaction you're receiving over the Trib when you break news like this?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And I think part of it comes from, look at the teams in the Big 12 that have had success this year. Kenny Dillingham, who's 34 years old, fresh slate. He's at his alma mater, which Morgan Scalley is also young and would be at his alma mater if, he were to take over as coach, in the next couple of seasons. And they see the type of season Utah had under a guy like Kyle Whittingham, who isn't entering his 21st year at the helm. And, there's questions of whether or not, okay, can his system work in the NIL world? Can his system work with the transfer portal? Because, Kyle Whittingham, 10 years ago could walk into a room and go up to guys and be like, you're getting 5 stars, but I'm getting 3 stars and I'm out developing you and beating you. Nowadays that's not the case. You can't have a 3-star guy, developing, or if he shows flashes, a money hungry team's going to come pick him up and be like, hey, you want to join our team? We'll pay you $1 million, $2 million. And like I said, I think it goes back to, the way this season is going to go. I think will be very telling to see whether or not, Utah fans' concerns are really true or not, and I'm not one to doubt Kyle Whittingham. Like you said, he's one of probably the greatest head coach in the state of Utah ever to live, like you said, besides Lavelle Edwards. And so, I think there is a portion of the fan base that, is frustrated because, you see what happens with Mac Brown. You see what happened with Mike Gundy, the board of trustees or their board of regents, approaching him and telling him he needs to take a salary cut for NIL. Kyle Whittingham's still making $7 million a year. He just came off the worst losing streak of his entire career. So I think there's a lot of Utah fans that feel, are they headed in the best direction as a program? I'm not one to say if they are or they aren't, but, I think when you see what happened with Kenny Dillingham and, Arizona State having the type of success they did with, Cam Scatterbo and Dan Leavitt and so forth, making a playoff for, this is a renaissance season for Arizona State, and they were I think ranked last in the preseason Big 12 rankings. So, I think there's a lot of could that happen at Utah if Morgan Scalley were to take over? I would say there is. I'm kind of like you. I'm more of an observer. I don't like interacting much on Twitter. I'm just a guy who, I like reporting on really fun stories and, digging deep and trying to talk to some of my people that I talk to on the phone and so forth. But, from being an observer on Twitter or X or whatever they call it, there is some upset people for sure, I would say. So, yeah.
All right, buddy. Well, good to have you back. Keep up the great work. Have a good week, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a good one. Appreciate you guys for having me on.
Jason Batacchio, Utah beat writer for the Salt Lake Tribune. He is a Oklahoma alum, so he had good context there with Ben Arbuckle heading to coach for the Sooners. So appreciate Ben's time. We got 1 hour left in the show. We're going to say goodnight for the Craig Smith Coaches Show, then Monday Night Football between the Cowboys and the Bengals. We'll do 1 hour of college football to take you home. Drive at 5 on a Monday. Before we catch a break, I got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's a lot easier than some of the other options if you have ever decided to dabble to gamble on sports. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 200 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. So we'll use Monday Night Football as an example. Tonight, something like CeeDee Lamb, more or less than 85 receiving yards. Joe Burrow, more or less than 3.5 passing touchdowns. So you don't have to worry about the spread or over/under or the money line. It's just a lot easier. It's a lot easier way to do it if you ever want to try it. They're giving away free money right now. If you download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700, you're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go on a Monday. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? It is time now for the Drive at 5. Your commute home on this Monday afternoon/evening starts right now. It is a chilly Utah December Monday evening, Monday, December the 9th. And, of course, as it is every day, it's great to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass, producing the program today. A jam-packed edition of The Drive with some great guests. Bill Bush is going to join us. Oh, by the way, did you ever effort the Entertainment Tonight media personality, radio personality, Billy Bush?
No,
Not
believe
that.
it or not,
Okay.
Entertainment Tonight, not responding to requests at the moment.
For local Salt Lake City, Utah Sports Talk Radio?
Apparently not.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, Bill Bush, more interesting for this ecosystem in stratosphere. He coached with Kyle Whittingham. He coached with Bronco Mendenhall. He won a national championship at LSU. So a great guest to have on this Monday. Bill currently is in Las Vegas, as is the majority of the Utah football coaching staff and family, because Alex Smith is going to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. So good job by Porter booking Bill today to react to the news that Coach Witt is coming back. And we've talked a lot about that today throughout the course of the show with a number of different guests, namely Josh Furlong and Jason Batacchio from KSL and the Salt Lake Tribune, respectively. Both of them cover the University of Utah. And a quiet weekend press release with only 2 words, I'm back. And Coach Witt will be back for his 21st season, which, of course, has dominated a lot of the topics today, in addition to the entire quarterback room entering the transfer portal over the weekend. Isaac Wilson, gone. Sam Heward, gone. Brandon Rose, gone. We're still awaiting official word from Cameron Rising as to whether or not he will be back for his 8th year of eligibility for the University of Utah, but no news as of now, outside of a tweet from somebody reporting that it is unlikely that Cam will be back. So we'll have to wait and see. There's a little Monday Night Football tonight on your airwaves. When we say goodnight at 6 o'clock, we'll throw it over to Riles and the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Following that iteration of the Craig Smith Coaches Show, you'll hear the Bengals and the Cowboys coming up. That's going to get going at about 6:15 on ABC. The Bengals are a 4.5-point favorite. Over-under is 50.5, so maybe a lot of points scored tonight. 2 teams with audacious preseason expectations that did not come to fruition. Pete Thamel is reporting that North Carolina and Bill Belichick are high speed ahead to a deal to make Bill Belichick the next head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. No official word there just yet. NBA is on this weird NBA Cup break. So there is an NBA game tonight. It's the Knicks and the Raptors, 2 of the 8 teams left for the NBA in-season tournament or NBA Cup. The Emirates NBA Cup, I think, is how we're supposed to say that. Jazz are pretty much off all week. They're in action Friday for a random home game against Phoenix. And then they have 5 road games. Will not be back in Salt Lake until after Christmas. Believe it or not, the Jazz are back in Salt Lake on December the 28th for a home game against the 76ers. 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by Overtime Cards and Collectibles. It's the best spot for all your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon card collecting. You can buy all your favorites there and even take your cards in. Maybe you have some rare cards in your collection you don't even know about. Start thinking about the holidays. It's here. What gifts are you going to get for your friends and your loved ones? An Overtime Cards gift card is the perfect stocking stuffer. All the best trading cards and collectibles around. Go check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. They're located at 10673 South State Street. All right, a couple of thoughts here. And Porter, I'll get your take, too, on the college football playoff bracket. A lot of conversation about the CFP bracket after it was released over the weekend. After what I'll say was a really good, I'll stop short of saying great, conference championship weekend. Started out on Friday. We had the Army-Tulane game on the station. Boise didn't really have much of an issue with UNLV. The Boise offense stalled in the second half after Austin Genty went for a cool 209, 32 carries, 209 yards, 1 touchdown. Travis Hunter is going to win the Heisman, but Austin Genty should have something to say about it. So Boise with a pretty impressive win in the Mountain West Conference Championship. Of course, the auto bid is what I have kind of an issue with. I'll get to that in a moment. But Boise, as a result of not just their win, but the only loss they had on the year is to the number 1 team in the country. That is Oregon. Boise locks in the number 3 seed. They get a bye. They're going to take on the winner of SMU Penn State, by the way. Penn State, for some reason, For some reason, Penn State is your big winner here. They get an SMU team who, sorry, BYU, I feel like they are overvalued in this system. Penn State's nearly a double-digit favorite. That line is 9.5. And then they get to take on the not the G5, but, ultimately Boise State, who by most measurable metrics is not near the challenge that Oregon would be or Georgia would be. I think you can have a decent conversation about ASU and Boise State. Honestly, I feel that way. But Penn State rewarded with a path that is a lot easier than Oregon's. Oregon, who there's no debate that Oregon has earned the benefit of the doubt. They're undefeated. They win the Big Ten in their first year. They've got like a top 20 offense and defense. And Oregon's prize for winning every single game in their first year and probably the second hardest conference, if not the toughest conference in college football, is potentially getting Ohio State in the second round. It's Ohio State, Tennessee, and Oregon will advance to take on the winner of that game. So that struck me as odd, but it's the auto bid stuff that really is more frustrating than everything else. Oregon, Penn State played a really entertaining game. It didn't feel like Oregon was ever in danger of losing that. Penn State threw a bunch of counter punches. Dylan Gabriel was awesome. He now has more starts than even Bo Nix. And that formula Dan Lanning has up in Eugene is certainly fallible as of now. I mean, he has done a hell of a job, but Oregon, to me, was never really in doubt of losing that game, and they've proven their worth atop the college football ecosystem as the best team in the country. Georgia, Texas, super entertaining overtime game. First time that the SEC championship game went into overtime, and Sark's team could not get it done. Therefore, Georgia gets the bye. Clemson outlasts SMU in the ACC championship game, but their reward for winning the ACC down as the 12 seed, and they're going to take on Texas round one. Now, the winner of that game advances to take on Arizona State. A lot of conversation about whether or not the Big 12 champ would do enough to get that first round bye, and the fact that they had some upsets, air quotes upsets, with Clemson beating SMU as well as Georgia beating Texas. And a lot of people were believing that if UNLV could beat Boise State, maybe that was enough for ASU to get that top four bye, but they had a couple of other upsets and went their way. And, of course, today the conversation is about Alabama. It's about Miami. It's about some of the blue bloods in college football, the brands in college football that did not get the benefit of the doubt. And I think last week when they had SMU ranked ahead of Bama, that was kind of all you needed to know. I didn't think we'd have the myriad of upsets. I thought Bama was going to get in. I thought that's what the committee was telling us. But as unpopular as it might be around here, and it's weird because I do think you need to incentivize conference championship games. I believe that to be true. But the auto bid stuff, to me, is the issue here because that operates off the premise that every conference is equal, and it just isn't. I mean, I don't think that's a hot take to say. It's been that way for a long time. And yes, at times it gets exhausting, and certainly in a conference where it was the WAC, it was the Mountain West, and then Utah gets to the Pac-12, but there's always this narrative back in 2004 or 2008, 2009 when Utah had two undefeated teams. Were they getting enough credit for what they were doing? Was anyone really paying attention to what the University of Utah was doing in Salt Lake City? So the brand bias thing around here rubs people the wrong way. And yes, there is a TV component to this, as I've talked about for years. There are powerful television executives with loud voices in the room because they pay the bills of the majority of the revenue. When it comes to the majority of revenue in college football, it's live TV rights. That's not new. So yes, you do have to take into consideration what ESPN wants. Obviously, a lot of people believe ESPN is ruining college football because of the clear conflict of interest. You have to keep in mind what your broadcast partners want. And what they want is the most watched television show on their television station so they can sell more advertising, so they can bring in more revenue. It's not that hard to understand. But ultimately, I said this when they expanded to 12. Everyone said, well, that's going to do away with the argument of who should be in the top four, whatever, five. I said, no, we'll still debate and argue about teams 13 through 15 or whatever. I mean, we're still going to have those arguments. But the auto bids, to me, that's something that the powers that be in college football simply need to talk about, because I still believe Alabama is one of the 12 best teams in the country. And if you look at the CFP rankings, and I've said this forever, the rankings are not the seedings. Alabama is the 11th ranked team in the country, but they're not in the 12-team expanded CFP. Clemson's the 16th team in the country, but they win the ACC, and they get a top 12 bid. And you could make an argument that BYU's resume is better than SMU's, who did not win a conference championship, but they're in as the 11th seed, while Brigham Young wasn't even considered for an at-large bid at 17. And yes, I believe you need to incentivize winning conference championships, but it doesn't mean they should get one of those top 4 buys. That's my point. It's the format as opposed to the idea of an expansion that is a little bit frustrating for me to understand exactly what they incentivize and what they're looking at. I don't mind the expansion. It means more high-level college football. But if you're going to tell me that just as a result of winning the ACC in a watered-down year, SMU played nobody and they lost the ACC championship. It was a great game, and they threw punches. But it shouldn't just be automatic if you win a watered-down conference, suddenly you get a top 4 seed. Due respect to Boise. Due respect to Arizona State. They need to figure out a way to incentivize college championship weekend, college football conference championship weekend, without locking the conference championships into a bye. I don't like that because ultimately it means teams that I don't perceive to be some of the best in college football get a pathway to a national championship because they won the conference, even if the conference is watered down. And ultimately, these schools, these member institutions, don't have control over their schedules. So what are you hoping? You're hoping that the conference offices reward you with a manageable schedule. And really what the message the committee sent, and the danger here now, are potential changes in conference scheduling where the SEC might just schedule each other and not worry about any of this other stuff that has come back to bite them. I don't have a lot of room for Bama complaints. While I do believe, and the playoff rankings indicate, they're a top 12 team, you can't lose a quarter of your games and still get in. And that goes for Ole Miss and South Carolina as well. And Miami, to me, was living on a razor's edge all year, lost a couple of games down the stretch, no room for their belly aching. But Arizona State, according to the rankings, are the 12th team in the country, and they get a top 4 seed. Same thing with Clemson at 16, and they're in. I just think it's a little silly. All right, we'll catch a break. Coming up next, Bill Bush stops by. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, Craig Smith Coaches Show. Coming up on the other side, it's Riles, it's Craig Smith, and it's time for Monday Night Football, Bengals and Cowboys. Before we get out of here, got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Best place to get real money sports action. It's really easy. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players. So tonight, Jamar Chase, more or less 90 receiving yards. We'll use CeeDee Lamb, more or less 1.5 receiving touchdowns. You get the idea. It's that easy. Giving away absolutely free money. So you should go grab that. and see if you're into it. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Porter, time for the Coaches Show. Then Monday Night Football, what comes our way on a Tuesday show live from Advanced Window Products.
Yeah, Craig Smith Coaches Show coming up next. And then tomorrow we'll rejoin you. Tony Jones stops by the program. The return of TJ, Tim McMahon for the NBA Daily Assist, and Big T Bailey. As you'll notice, some hoops tomorrow, but we will continue to talk some college football. Of course, some coaching angles there as well with one Mike Sanford Jr. will join the program. He's doing some radio in Denver, so he's got a lot of radar on some Utes and otherwise, and good to catch up with him.
That'll be a fun Tuesday show. With that, we'll say goodnight. Special thanks to Bill Bush, Tom Haberstroh, Josh Furlong, and Jason Bataki. For any of the sound you may have missed, go to the website, ESPN700sports.com. Check out our app, our ESPN 700 app. That's in the App Store, Google Play Store for free. Then finally, for what we do in our space, head on over to our podcast page, subscribe, rate, review. Say nice things. Give us all the stars on your platform. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. Available wherever you get your shows. He's Porter. I'm Spence. Say goodnight. Craig Smith Coaches Show is next. And then Monday Night Football. Talk to you on a Tuesday drive right here on ESPN 700.